You guys ready for the debate? I'm ready for the debate. PaulsEgo, who is a co-host for Deep Fat Fried, who I've debated on Ukraine before, I think like a year or 2 years ago. They said we'd talk about it again later. That has not happened yet. We'll see if it ever does. We disagreed quite a lot because I thought his way of looking at the war at the time was naive. I thought that the way he looks at war as is like it's a button to be pushed or something you can just kind of dodge or move around. And whereas a lot of times when a crisis like an invasion comes to you, it's not okay, option A or option B between no war or war. There's stuff that's attached to that. Like if you say no war, okay, occupation. If you wanted to avoid violence, what if that occupation comes with executions? What if that comes with the erasure of your national identity? What if it comes with mass prisons and detainments for political opposition? I mean, like, the Ukrainians have dealt with that multiple times before. They lost a lot of intelligentsia due to Soviet purges. And, you know, the Ukrainians, for good reasons, are fearful of that, especially with the rumors of the kill lists at the start. So I thought that his way of looking at it as something that you can necessarily always avoid was naive, especially if you value things like political freedoms, civil liberties, the independence of your country and nationality, or your basic sovereignty. And so for me, if you get invaded, it's like you're a boat and a rock just hit your ship. It just happened. You can try to, you know, after the fact you talk about it, but it just hit your ship. You've got to deal with the situation. You've got to patch the hole and you've got to keep the ship sailing. You don't just like, okay, I guess no more ship, I'll just drown. Or, you know, I'll just give up and just jump on the buoy and give up on having a boat to begin with. No, you do your best. You do your best to preserve your civil liberties, preserve the things that you care about, especially if you just caving into warmongers is just going to egg them on and then lead to more wars. Like the Russians win in Moldova and Ukraine. What do you think Moldova thinks? Anyway, so I found his view at the time as naive. Very naive.
Love from DGG Blueheart.
Thank you for the $5. Got a lot of DGGers in chat tonight. Don't get rowdy with the other guys. No fighting. No fist fighting. No illicit substances, okay? The cops are watching the stream. Be careful in there, okay? Don't get pinched. And if you get pinched, okay, don't talk until a lawyer is present. So I wanted to watch this debate. I wanted to watch this back and forth because PaulsEgo was talking to me a lot about his age in reference to me as how, you know, he'd seen so much. And since he was around the block more, maybe that affects his view compared to mine. But I think that no matter of how many years that pass, like there's not a lot of depth that goes into the position that war is bad, and then you go no deeper than that. That's something you realize immediately once you interact with war. But I mean, like, sometimes like chemotherapy is bad, but that doesn't mean like, well, okay, chemotherapy hurts the body, but if you were to just, okay, I give up on chemotherapy, the outcome could be worse there in certain circumstances. Anyway, let's get into it. Oh, and when UkrainianAna comes on this, let me just say, pray for her. I pray for her, and I sympathize.
Because I'm telling you, like, dude, I'm a huge anti-war guy, right? You can try and drag me out of that. I'm a Dalton Trumbo, Johnny got his gun, anti-war. War is murder. War is fucking, you know, a man crying in a ditch to see his mother one last time as his fucking intestines come out, right? Like, that's me. And I don't think anybody on the left made a cogent anti-war argument this time around.
Well, okay, sure, but I mean, it's hard because, like,
by the way, this is a critique for like the campaign and like why Democrats are failing. So they should have made a more anti-war argument. Is something that he wants to see from them. And like in respect for what? I can understand Gaza because the lines there are clearly drawn. But when we talk about Ukraine, what should be expressed when you say an anti-war argument in reference to Ukraine? Because if you just say, okay, give in, and then the Russians invade again in 3 years, you're not anti-war. If anything, you've just helped the invaders. You haven't solved anything. You just delayed the butchery for like a few years.
It's, I mean, like, where does that leave us for Ukraine and Israel? But
well, I mean, you know, these are the types of things that are going to be contentious between you and I, right? I don't have a problem talking about them, but I do have strong feelings on both Israel and Ukraine and what I think the United States could do, right?
Okay.
But I don't know that you want to go down that road because we're talking more generalized kind of like campaign strategy, right? And I'm just trying to tell you from my perspective, the support and continued support of...
Oh, by the way, can I just get out there? I don't think like PaulsEgo is like a terrible human being or anything. I know a ton of hippies like PaulsEgo that I'd smoke with and like, you know, like, I don't know, take some LSD and watch some cartoons or something with, have a nice time, just eat some Cheez-Its, whatever. But that's what I do with them. I wouldn't discuss the ins and outs of the Russian invasion or whether or not it was necessary for them to defend themselves, because I feel like you get kind of stuck in brain dead loops because you either aesthetically or just out of repulsion are unwilling to accept the reality of what an invasion means for these people and the actual options available. And I always don't have much respect for people willing to sell out others' freedom. And a lot of times this peacenickery smells so much of that. Selling out other people for your own feeling of safety. Thousands of miles away from the battlefield.
Like war, when I honestly feel like, you know, and maybe you can disabuse me of this notion that Joe Biden could have picked up the phone and been like, hey, this, you know, America enforced fucking ceasefire now until we sort out what's going on here.
Yeah, the
right?
issue, this is a macro question of foreign...
What just happened? It just glitched out hard for me.
Till we sort out what's going on here.
Yeah, the
right?
issue, this is a macro question of foreign... This is a
okay, as per, like, Joe Biden can go in there and try to enforce a peace... So, like, deploy troops? Send American forces? Like, we should go in there and bust it up? Or, like, we could just use our threat of force to do that? Because I don't think we could. I don't think the Russians would believe that we'd be willing to engage troops on the ground. And I don't think that they'd be willing to respect our power unless we were able to demonstrate that we would be willing to do it when it comes to this is the deal you will accept if we were the ones to use force. Not to mention the American public is very against deploying troops to Ukraine. There are some radicals, I imagine, some hardcore guys like, yeah, send me over. I know some Marines, but most are against it. And so you would be leveraging that the Russians would believe post-Afghanistan withdrawal, which PaulsEgo was also in favor of, by the way, that the United States would be willing to deploy troops on the ground and fight the Russians, a atomic power, in order to force terms that America likes, or we'd be able to bluff our way into something like that by threatening power and strength. Because it's not like the Russians are going to do it out of kindness or out of diplomatic respect. They're going to do it if they were given no other option but to do that, except an American brokered ceasefire. At least on terms that would be acceptable to the Ukrainians.
macro question of morality in general. But the problem is that we would have to go down a whole philosophy route. Like, being anti-war or pro-peace, peace is not really what anybody's looking for, and peace is a very naive thing. Like, there was peace in America when we, you know, had slavery.
Notice I didn't say peace. I didn't say no.
I'm just saying. I understand. I'm just saying that, like, there is no, when one side wants to fight, you can't just be anti-war. When Russia wants to invade Ukraine, you can't just be anti-war. Right. You have to stand up to that, and that's a pro-war position to a lot of people. So what do you do?
If China landed here in, you know, California, I would, you know, my anti-war position would at the best lead me to being a POW. At worst, probably just get me slaughtered, right? So, no, I understand that peace is sometimes enforced by war, right?
By the way, we have, like, you can be you can object through conscience. There are people in the United States who instead, during World War II, because they refused to kill a man, they served in, like, the U.S. Forest Service, fighting, like, wildfires and, like, finding other ways of public service to get around joining, you know, the U.S. Army. I'm sure PaulsEgo could go, you know, fuck a tree or something, you know, find something else to do if we get invaded by the Chinese. I must be a stone in the face of Chinese invasion, governed by Washington, governed by Beijing, governed by Moscow. I am but the stone in the face of your human nationalist squabbles. I don't really know how far that would stand up once you got massacre here, massacre there, massacre everywhere, and it's actually near you. Don't need to go be a soldier, but you can support in other ways.
So I'm not naive in that, like, we're going to have this complex multinational society with no conflict ever, right? It is how we, as a nation that, you know, stands as maybe still the most powerful military on the planet, right, as to my understanding, how we enforce our presence on other nations matters to me, right? And so I would rather.
Okay, but when we're talking about Ukraine, this is like the most morally clear cut. Like, the Ukrainians are told by us to give up their atomic weapons or in order to like get aid from the United States. There were some on the House floor that threatened to starve them over it. They were saying we could use our food aid to starve the Ukrainians when they have an inflation rate of 10,000% to make them give up their atomic weapons to the Russians. They do, under the agreement that there would be a declaration in the memorandum that if their sovereignty was threatened, that we'd come to support them. They then get their sovereignty threatened in 2003 when it comes to the bridge crisis. They then get their sovereignty really threatened in 2014 when the Russians try to use economic coercion, which they agreed not to do during the Budapest Memorandum. Then the people are brutalized by the police, which I don't know if PaulsEgo is a huge fan of Popo. I don't believe he is. But they're brutalized by the police. Over 100 people die. The government flees after they hire gangs to put down the protests, and it does not work. The Russians then invade. And then we let them take Crimea. We just kind of stand back and we don't really do anything. We enforce some sanctions. And for the next 8 years, we try the approach of, well, we'll concede this, we'll concede that. We don't want to give them any offensive weapons. How about we give them radar so they can see themselves getting bombed? In what area could we have been weaker that it would have made the Russians not invade? Also understanding Russian nationalist beliefs about what Ukraine is as an extension of the Ruski Mir, the Russian world. I mean, Putin wrote multiple essays about how Ukraine doesn't exist, man. His opening speech of the war, when he thought he was going gangbusters and he was just going to kick in the door and the whole rotten edifice of Ukraine would collapse around him, he was talking about how Ukraine could only exist as an extension of Russia. So, like, for me, it's like, this is how I want the United States to engage. Being credible, upholding our commitments, supporting our allies against authoritarian invasions that are engaging in massacres and hosting human safaris in Kherson. Definitely considering that the other party in the agreement is the country that is invading, violating said agreement. And it's been going on for over a decade. At one point, do you have to say, okay, we have to stand by the people we said we'd stand by. So yes, I do think this isn't going to a country that has ever heard the word democracy and then saying, you're going to believe in democracy now because the guys who were here before didn't like us, so now we need to make you like democracy and eat burgers and yada, yada, yada. And then everybody rebels, and then we deal with a 20-year insurgency. The people there want us there. So, like, the way that people are, like, phrasing these wars, like Vietnam, or like Afghanistan, or even like Iraq, like, it doesn't match. And so a lot of this, like, experience PaulsEgo is pulling from in his long life of 40-something, it's not in wars that are comparable. This is the largest war in Europe since World War II. There is no comparable example from the War on Terror era.
Rather that phone call have happened and we start sorting it out with international courts and international bodies, right?
Well,
what's going to happen between these two?
Asking.
So I'm talking about like the United Nations.
You know what this sounds like to me? This feels like you're watching somebody getting mugged in an alley and you're like, what? That you can't do that. That's illegal. Someone get the law. Okay, but the law's not here, and the law don't got a gun. And even if the law could get here, the mugging's gonna be done by the time you leave. You got the gun. You can hand it to the person being mugged. What do? Mind you, the UN in this example would not have a gun, and the mugger in question would get a say on whether the police in question could even interfere, because of the UN Security Council's veto power. So, I don't really think it works. I think if the courts could have solved it, they would have by now, no? I mean, what about like the territorial crisis in the Scarborough Shoal? Chinese in the Philippines come to the table to negotiate the territorial status of the Scarborough Shoal, which the Chinese claim, but the Philippines have controlled, governed, and have their fishermen fishing off of for decades and decades and decades. The International Arbitration Court decides, no, this is a Filipino land. The Chinese just ignore it, even though they said they'd respect it before, say, never mind, and then they just start ramming the fishing boats. What did the UN do? What did the International Court do? They did nothing, because their job is arbitration. Their job is to talk, but when you've got a big gun, that seems to talk louder.
Right.
I'm not saying that this is great. I want the world to be different. I want these international organizations to be more empowered and be able to act against larger nations that would typically be able to challenge their authority. But I also acknowledge that this is 2024 and we don't live in that world right now.
I'm talking about,
but I mean, like,
the United Nations stepping in and enforcing a peace between these two nations.
I understand what you're saying. The United Nations, right? The body of the United Nations that would be in charge of doing like big moves like this would be the United Nations Security Council, of which Russia is a permanent member. So,
okay. So in order to count, see, this is maybe I got a blind spot on this.
You're good.
I get accused a lot of like, that sounds like Russian shit. And I honestly, like, I'm not tuned in. I'm not a tanky guy. I think Russia is a shithole. You know what I mean? You're not going to catch me making excuses for Russia. At least not in my mind. But a lot of people will say when, you know, I get into how I feel about Ukraine and how the United States ought to handle it, right? Or ought to have handled it, maybe, looking retrospectively. Okay. I get accused a lot. But I just want to, like, make that explicit, dude. You know, I'm not a fucking communist. I don't even really call myself a socialist. Like, I'm like just a labor left guy.
Okay.
That being said, my prescription for that area of the world would have been a UN enforced ceasefire before.
Yeah, but
the
I
entirety.
I understand what you're saying. Okay.
Right,
I'm just saying
right.
that, like, so you have,
Okay, these are all beautiful ideas. Like, if the UN could, like, make a demarcated zone between the different armies and stop the intermittent shelling and, you know, but I just don't think the Russians would agree with it. I don't think that's, like, actionable. I don't think that's feasible at this stage. And it would stop the Russians from reigniting the war, which would be good. That's why I don't think they'd agree to it. But I mean, like, it's a nice idea, but I think it's just an idea. You know, maybe like under future circumstances in 2-3 years or whenever, you know, when something's written down, maybe something like that will be included down the line. But why would the Russians agree to that in 2015 if they believe Ukraine is an extension of Russia? If they believe Ukraine's an extension of Russia, then why would an international body be dictating the borders and boundaries and the actions of the Russian armed forces? I'm not saying it's impossible for something like this to ever concede. It's just we need to think about and be prepared for the likely outcomes of it not succeeding.
You have like two big parts to the UN, right? You've got the United Nations General Assembly, which is made up of all 196 member states. And then you've got like the United Nations Security Council. Whenever you get like big shit from the UN, like sanctions or like enforced, like, you know, no-fly zones or crazy shit like that, that's coming from the United Nations Security Council. Now, on the United Nations Security Council, there are, I think, 5 permanent members. And one of those permanent members is Russia. The reason being...
The other 5.
I'm saying that, like, and you have to do things like these people have something called veto power, which means that they can automatically, one member can automatically veto anything that comes out of the United Nations.
So who is Russia supporting you're saying that they would be a spoiler vote on the Security Council?
Yeah, Russia would never vote for sanctions or anything on themselves. They would never vote to stop themselves.
Pro-Russian? So allowing the Israeli-Palestinian kind of conflict to rage out of control and materially supporting it, is that a pro-Russian thing?
To some extent, yes. Because the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is part of a broader conflict in the Middle East, which is the Israeli-Arab conflict, which has kind of morphed into the, or it's evolved into, it's become incorporated by this Iranian-Saudi conflict. So there's an Iranian axis that is composed of or comprised of like Iran, kind of Iraq, and and Syria, and that's supported by Russia and North Korea and China. And then you have the Saudi Arabian axis, which includes Israel now, which is supported by the United States. And the Palestinian issue that's supported by that Iranian axis, so Iran and their foreign actors like the Houthis or Hezbollah or Hamas, and Russia is obviously in support of that side. And then on the other side, you have Saudi Arabia, that axis, which includes now Israel, which is supported by the United States. So it's an extension kind of that, yeah.
Is this so my understanding is not specific but broad, right? So am I right in saying that this is an issue of the war, like multipolarity in the world, right? So
I mean, it would be a symptom
you're talking
of
about
multipolarity, but sure.
You're okay, a symptom. Fine, fair enough. Okay, so we're talking like BRICS, right?
Sure.
So
although that's not really a big thing yet, but yeah, what about it?
Well, do you think it will be like, well, in this discussion, that is kind of what we're talking about, right? We're talking about a different axis of power with different.
Why would BRICS, I mean, like, support, you can support Ukraine irregardless of whether or not BRICS finally decides on a challenger for the US dollar, which it still has not done. But I mean, like, or if it ever does. Like, I see how this is in the general conversation of civilizational struggles, but kind of, we're a little removed now, aren't we?
Desires for the world and different plans, right, for their influence on the world, coming as counter, countering one another in a military and economic way, right? Like working opposed to one another in certain ways, right?
Yeah, I don't know what you're asking or what you're saying exactly, but.
Okay, like I was just asking if, like, my understanding of the kind of like coming multipolarity of the world is what you're talking about, and I guess the answer is no.
Well, I mean, like there is a little bit of multipolarity right now, but.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry if that was a non sequitur. I was just trying to like understand how this fits into my less specific knowledge on this broader kind of talk, right?
Okay.
Because I'll be honest with you, where I come from is a much more just kind of resistant place, right? When I see people dying, and I'm not trying to fucking be a moralist on your show, right? Mm-hmm. When I see average people dying, who's to blame for that starts to matter less to me than stopping it.
That's great, but those people don't even agree with you. Like, no, like in history, like generally, depending on what you're talking about, those people don't even agree with you. Like the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong didn't want to just stop people dying. They wanted to expel the United States from Vietnam. In the Civil War, the North and the South didn't just want people to stop dying. You know, the North and the South fought for either a unified or an independent United States. Or like in the right, like. Yeah, so
you're talking about broad experience, right? You're talking about a nation state operating as a big organism, right? Yeah. Versus the singular experience of a soldier whose guts are falling out.
Yeah, that's fine, but singular experiences of people are also part of broader narratives.
Yeah, you put a bunch of singular experiences together to get a general national perspective.
Like define what those people are willing.
And the recent data from Pew Research Center shows that the majority of Ukrainians do want to negotiate, but only 29% of the country would be willing to make territorial concessions. And when you talk about territorial concessions, they mean any, meaning Crimea. So some of them might be like, okay, Crimea, 10% is only willing to, 10% is willing to give everything up. But maybe the rest is like, no, we just meant Crimea. No, we just maybe meant some parts of Donetsk. No, we did not mean Mariupol. We did not mean the rest of Kherson region. I'm from Kherson region. And so you get to a point where they're seeing the largest mass graves in Europe since World War II. They're seeing the human safari in Kherson. They're seeing the Bucha massacre. They're seeing all these atrocities. They're seeing the lack of civil liberties and the destruction of the Ukrainian national identity. And, those things matter to people. Freedom matters to people. This is the same thing I said earlier about selling out another person's freedom for their sake, as if you know better than them.
Do, right?
Like, of course, most Ukrainians want peace, but if the price of peace is too high, then you have the risk of A, just extending the war because all you've done is delayed the inevitable, or B, having an unjust peace that might not lead to peace at all, but even if it does, it might still contain many elements of violence. For example, repressionary executions, imprisonment of political prisoners, etc. I mean, I like the idea of the place that Paul is coming from. It's very, what's the word? Burning Man. Yes. It's Burning Man foreign policy.
When morale for a country is high, like individuals are willing to die for their country to further some political belief or idea.
And then when but there are times in history too where the worm turns, right? And people start to question.
Yeah, of course. That
the validity of throwing their bodies upon the fucking pyre.
We left Vietnam, right? Yeah, especially because of the video.
Or in some instances, people will question it, not even because they would never fight, but under certain conditions. For example, a lot of Ukrainian defectors I know are like, I'm not joining, and it's not because I never would. I just don't trust our commanders. Or I don't trust that I'm not going to be stuffed in some Lada and sent to the front, you know, because we don't have the armored vehicles. So, I mean, it could be a bunch of different factors.
Those in the footage of a lot of people coming back injured and traumatized from war, yeah.
Right, and that and I know you understand, you know, the political situation of Ukraine and Russia probably way better than I do, given how long you've covered it. But my understanding and the thing that matters to me more than the broader context is the million people in the dirt, dude. A million fucking conscripts in the dirt.
That's fine.
Where did he get that number from? A million? I mean, you'd have to include every Russian dead and wounded, as well as probably every Ukrainian dead and wounded. When you say in the dirt, though, that assumes dead. And the majority of Ukrainians' casualties have been wounded. If you go by the Economist estimate, at the highest echelon, we're talking about 100,000 people on the Ukrainian side. And, I mean, even if we went to a really high Russian estimate of like 300, 400 to 500,000, I mean, at best, you're getting like half of the number he's talking about when it comes to dead. Of course, we don't have the exact casualty numbers from Mariupol and other locations. But, I mean, I get, we're working with big numbers here, and we're just throwing out a number. It's just, I don't know where he got the number from. And what he means by in the dirt. Because in the dirt, to me, would imply dead, not wounded.
Okay, but when you care about things like dead people, you're coming from the West, where that's like the most important thing to care about, right? Like just whether or not somebody's alive or dead is like the most important thing to care about. Okay, that's all that matters, because you have a country, you have a narrative, you have a story, you've got a government, you've got all these things that are working for you. Okay, and now all you have to think about is like, okay, well, am I going to die or am I going to live, or is this person going to die or live? And that's it. Okay, right. When you look at, and there's broader narratives here that even I don't understand, because I'm not a part of it, because I don't have that lived experience. So I'm very, very, very loosely going about what people say. Okay, but Eastern Europe has fought for legitimacy. Places like Poland have fought for legitimacy to be included in the Western world for decades. Okay, this idea of breaking from the Soviet Union, of being your own country. Like, we are a people. We are more than just foreign fucking workers for British people. We're more than just temporary visa stays, you know, to work in the summer and then go back to our shitty Eastern European countries. Like, we want to fight our corruption. We want to join the rest of the world. We want to be real countries with real people that are free of like corrupt and crazy leaders and bureaucrats that are trying to fuck us over constantly. Like, we're trying to become a thing. Okay, and Ukraine has been historically a country that's had a lot of issues with corruption and a lot of issues with trying to break from that stereotype of Eastern European destitution. And they were on the path to doing that. And they had a leader who was...
Destiny is getting much better at, like, describing aspects of the Ukrainian perspective. I don't know if it's because he's hanging out with Anna a lot more, if he's listening more to Ukrainian perspectives or what's going on, but he's getting better at it. And I do want to give that compliment, because I had a little sit-down with Destiny after the Ben Shapiro conversation. I was like, dude, why were you so soft on him? These are the guys that used to be like, of course, they're an enemy of America. Go in and fight. And now we're for a good cause. And he's like, well, I don't know. Like, go. Like, you know, grab him by the neck on this. Like, what's going on? And since then, he's, I've seen him, I think, press more. And I appreciate that pressure. I appreciate that he's not just, like, letting other people frame the narrative, or letting the narrative be unframed, letting that perspective be unstated. So this is a discussion about, you know, a bunch of foreigners dividing up a map, instead of like, wait, you know, these people have to live in these communities, right? Like, hey, sell Palestine to the Arabs, sell Palestine to the Jews, sell Palestine to whoever, because you're not going to be there in 5 years anyway, so who cares? And it's not the way we should approach it. We should approach it for long-term stability and justice. Thank you for the $5. I'm so dumb. I thought you were moderating a live debate for the past 20 minutes. That's okay. That was Canadian money, so I'll forgive you. You know, we all have problems. Dylan, what happened to you? What does that mean? What do you mean by that? What happened to you? You said that like I said something wrong. Did I say something bleak? Am I dooming and I don't know it?
You know, the populist support was, hey, we're finally going to have access to European markets. We're finally going to make a deal with the European Union. We're finally moving in that direction. And then they had a leader who was like, actually, no, we're going to go back to Russia, get fucked. And as a result,
mind you, Yanukovych originally agreed in 2012 on the campaign trail to enter the association agreement. And he reversed policy after pressured in the middle of the night. So he reversed on a campaign promise at midnight to repress protests. Then there were protests, which he suppressed violently, and the rest is history. So it's not just that he was doing something the majority of people didn't want. He was also going back on a promise that he made to show that he wasn't, you know, Russia's...
Result of like all the protests and all of the riots and all of this, they have their huge 2014 Euromaidan, and basically what they see in front of them is, oh, it's business as usual. Here comes Russia, there goes Crimea, and now we're back in this world where we're going to be subjugated by Russia. We're not a Western country. We're not even a real country. We're a group of fucking losers who nobody else in the rest of the world wants to help or do anything for. Obama's not doing fuck all for us. Europe isn't doing fuck all for us, and now Russia's fucking with our shit again. And this is a group of people who desperately want their own country, and they want to have a country that they can be a part of, that they can be proud of, that they can have a narrative and a place on the world stage, who slowly see themselves being eaten and consumed by the Soviet Union again. So to look at those people and go like, well, isn't it bad? Like, a lot of you guys have died. You should just make peace. Like, that's easy to say as an American with your own country, your own government, your own elected leaders. You have a story. You have all of that. That's a completely separate thing to look at Ukrainians who are bleeding away whole sections of their country while the rest of the world stands by and watches, and they'd be like, shouldn't you guys just stop because there's so many of you dying? Like, do you understand how horrible that is? Like, it's such a Western take. Not to say that death is good, but there's something more at play here. There has to be something more at play than just some people dying, because that's what's moved nations and peoples, is more than just like a concern for an individual or even just your family or even just your neighborhood. It's like this cause for an entire country, right?
Can I tell you something?
Yeah, what's up?
And I'm not even lying to you. Mm-hmm. That was incredibly moving and well done.
Thanks, buddy.
Like, here's the thing. Maybe I'm like, it's not, your kind of implication that the other end, that my end of this must be, I don't.
You know, Destiny has an easier time than I do, because he's not getting the, you know, you're pretty young. I'm an old whippersnapper. You know, so he just gets that was a moving speech. It was good though. Destiny's getting better at it.
Support Ukrainians is where we have a fundamental disagreement or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, but no, and that was well done.
I know that you're not like anti-Ukrainian, and you said that you don't support Russia, so I agree with you. I think sometimes in the West, I think we take for granted all the things that we have, and then we just assume that everybody else has these like same larger narratives and everything, and they just want to like not have as many people die for a thing. And it's hard in America. It's really hard to imagine wanting to die for a thing, because for the most part, like, things are pretty good over here. Like, fuck, I don't want to die for anything right now. Like, that's a pretty tall order. But given like a different set of circumstances, you know, maybe, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't like, look, I was talking about this kind of earlier. I was just doing kind of a nothing stream, and I was talking earlier about how, like, I'm incredibly American in terms of perspective. And I was kind of making a joke about it, right? But I cannot help that, you know, I'm just not super well traveled, right? Mm-hmm. I've never really had that opportunity in my life. And the times that I did maybe have the opportunity to make some sacrifices and do that, I just squandered those opportunities. I'm not saying that I couldn't. I'm not like fucking dead yet, but I'm not well traveled. I've been to Mexico, nominally to Canada. I don't even think I've crossed over into Canada. I've been close, but I've been all over the United States. I have a very blue collar, kind of like working class background. And I think it's very separate from the world that you operate in.
Sure.
And I think it puts us at natural, like, because look, I see who you've got on screen, like, other than me, right? Hassan, you're engaged in these kind of like online.
What would a Ukrainian labor organizing look like under occupied territories? What labor organizing is there? Like, if we want to talk, we can talk about this through the labor perspective as well. Let's talk about the perspective of Ukrainian trade unions and what they support.
Ideological battles, right? And I never really wanted that from our interactions from you because of moments like that speech you just gave. Trying to kind of like give me perspective on how I might feel were I a Ukrainian person, right?
Sure.
Beyond just the horror of my whole family's dead now. Dude, my father died in it. My mother died in it. My brothers and my sisters are dead, right? That's that as an emotional person, I think that's what I latch onto.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I think that it's hard to see down the road what waits for you if people aren't willing to make those sacrifices, right? Because there's a lot of like the Anna person who comes here and talks a lot. Like, I'm pretty sure her dad died just in a Russian bombing of a Ukrainian city. Like,
her father got killed by a grad rocket strike when the Russians were still in artillery range of the city. He was on the front porch, and the air raid alarm went off, and his wife tried to get him in, and he said, don't worry about it, because he was feeding this cat on the porch that he liked, and a grad rocket hit the balcony directly, basically tore him in half, just killed him instantly. But the mom was inside, so she was able to survive. But yeah, it's a very tragic story. It's very sad.
there was no dignity or nobility.
Yeah, I was listening to her. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, well, fuck, you know, like if other people aren't willing to step up, and honestly, like how much of the world has been carved out by people that were willing to step up and make these sacrifices, whether it's on behalf of a large group of people, like the revolutionary people in the American colonies against Great Britain, whether it's from revolutionary people like Nelson Mandela and people fighting in South Africa, you know, whether it's, you know, civil protests like MLK, you know, whether it's individual, like there are so many people where they're like at some point, and I don't know if it's just there's a slot in the human brain for it, so we're all programmed to some extent to have these feelings. Something is larger than your life or even the life of a family member or your life if you have a family. Like something is bigger there that humans are like intimately and innately gifted with the ability to understand, and that's why countries rise and fall, right? It's because people are capable of seeing something larger than themselves. Yeah.
I had, you know, I mentioned a book earlier, Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. And that was, I used to have a way, you know, probably a more standard American view on war. Don't like it, but necessary in certain cases. And, you know, minimizing the civilian casualties is something that you could possibly do. And that should be, you know, that sort of, and then I read this book and it just broke me, bro.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know if you've read the book or you're familiar with its contents at all, but it's a very intimate retelling of like a World War I soldier's kind of experience becoming a complete invalid, right? Like blind, their jaw is blown off. They're deafened by what happens to them, so they can't hear anybody. They're basically just a husk. They can't move. They're paralyzed, right? And it's their internal life in the wake of war. And when they went to war, right, they were filled with this kind of idea that you're saying, right? This I want to put my life on the line for something bigger than me. But at the end of it, broken and filled with heartache and just a desire to go back to before they made that decision, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely...
But if you talk to most Ukrainians, are they of the opinion, like, no, we should have never resisted. We should have done nothing in 2022. Or, like, in 2014, the main problem is that we fought back. Like, I don't get that perspective. I'll meet some people who say, well, if the war could have been avoided, I would prefer avoiding it. But obviously, once they invaded, I'll get stuff like that. Or, like, you know, I had a lot of friends that but I don't get the perspective of, we should never have resisted. We should never have fought. I don't get that perspective. And so the people here see those horrors firsthand. They don't read about it. It's not in a book, you know. My friends have gotten hit by Russian shrapnel. I've seen bodies. It's awful. But you can still see those horrors and understand how horrific the world is and still think that defending yourself is the worst of the options available. Like, obviously, if there's a burglar in your home and you go to confront them and you shoot them, they could end up swinging and then disabling you if they hit you in the back of the head, or they can end up killing you, or you could end up killing them and defending your family. But if you're forced into a certain position where you've got nowhere to go, it's not like Ukraine could hide, right? It's not like you could just put the country in the closet and hope the Russians pass by. They're put in a position where it's either defend or give up, and they decided to defend. And because of that, they still have a government, they still have a country, they're still able to practice their culture. Many people who would have been arrested and presumably executed or sent away forever are not. And Ukrainians still have what we would refer to as something resembling the freedoms that we appreciate. Not all of them, but a lot of them. It's a flawed society, but so are all. It's just, to me, it just, I don't know. It feels like the perspective of someone who's never had something to fight for, or could imagine sacrificing everything to change the current situation, because he's never faced something like this. But I mean, he seems to be kind of like tapping on that a little bit, like, oh, I've never thought about it this way before.
I mean, I don't deny that's a thing. But, you know, honestly, the thing that's given me probably the most kind of perspective on this is I'm sure that you remember when we grow up and we're in high school and we're watching videos of the people, you know, getting off the boats and going to Normandy and World War II and World War I and all this. And they always told us, like, these are just like, these are little kids fighting. They're 18, 19, you know, years old. These are just children. And, you know, I'm in high school. It's like, okay, I guess, like, these are adults, but, you know, okay, I guess they're kind of young compared to other people, right? Now being 35, right? The idea of an 18 or 19-year-old going to another country with military training rifle to kill people, that's an insane proposition. That's just that's just an unbelievable thing in my mind. Whereas when I was in school hearing about like 18, 19, okay, whatever, I guess these are basically adults.
Like if we were to talk about, let's talk about it from a more leftist angle. If you're like a Spanish guy during the Spanish Civil War and you're facing down Franco's army, if you're part of the trade union movement, makes sense that maybe you would want to defend your village and not have it get occupied, because there's a good chance that you and the rest of your comrades are going to end up wearing a rope necktie.
That's right. Now it's like, holy shit, these are actually like toddlers. So yeah, I mean, like it sucks, and it's not good. Like, war is not a cool or good thing for sure. Yeah.
Do you think you because you have a son as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it has changed since you were that age and in high school and shit, right? Like, you have a different perspective because of your boy?
No, like, I think for the war stuff, no. I think that perspective just came from getting older. Obviously, I mean, I also wouldn't want my kid to just die for no reason, but I'm just saying, being older.
He got the reverse. When I talked to PaulsEgo, he was like, well, I'm older, you know, I got certain experiences, you know, it just is what it is. Destiny just hit him with the Uno reverse card. This is debate karma coming around a year and a half late.
Role gives me a much different perspective on younger people, because as you go through the years, right? Because like when you're 23, 24, you think like, ooh, like 18, like those people are so, you know, young. And then you get like 30 and you look like a 22-year-old, like, bro, you're just like a fucking kid, you know? And now I'm 35, and like everybody under 25 is like, yeah, you guys are still in school, you barely work, you have no relationships. Like, yeah, I just think as you get older, that's like a thing. I don't think that having a kid is what necessarily changed. Like, oh no, my son could die. It's just more the idea of how young in general people can be.
Sure.
Yeah, it's crazy. There have been other things that happen.
Do you ever personify it down to that level? Do you ever think like?
Also, think about it this way. If you think about it to your kids. I meet a lot of people and they're like, I'm fighting because I don't want the artillery that's smashing the city I'm in to be smashing my city, which is 20 kilometers away, where that's my children. I do not want to have to evacuate them. I want them to grow up in a country where they can say what they want, they can believe what they want, they can read what they want, and they can vote. And they can live their culture the way they want. Or some variation of something like that. People fight for their families, not under the idea of like, we need to immediately stop a war from happening to stop you from, but fighting for values or a future. They're fighting for hope. And as much as we try to stamp down on hope as much as possible, it's quite stubborn.
My boy, you know, being sent to the front lines to defend, you know, if you were a Ukrainian streamer, right? Do you ever put that face on it, or do you think that's just emotionally compromising
Well,
your ability to be alive.
I mean, it depends, because there's some people who will be proud of their kids for going, and there's others that will try to pay money so their kids don't have to go, but still support resisting because they're, well, kind of hypocritical. And of course, they love their kid, and who doesn't love their kid and will do everything they can to protect them. Depends on the person.
Logical about it.
You have to be really careful when you talk about like emotion versus logic, because at the end of the day, humans are driven by emotion, and to pretend like that can't be like a lot, like, for instance, like if you're in charge of military like troops, if you've got like I mean, anybody with military experience here that's even like deployed, you know, in forward positions or whatever, like whether you have like military people under your command, whether you're playing a video game, whether you have a corporation, things like morale, which is emotional, are some of the most important things for your people. You can't just like feed them logic and say, we're going to go and blah, 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 blah. You have to keep people in high spirits. That's incredibly important. For having a kid, for me, the thing is just like military conflict like that is so far removed from anything the United States is generally involved in, like getting drafted and stuff like that. The things that having a kid moved me on were things like access to good schools or healthcare or, you know, financial stuff is the big thing in the United States. That having a kid is actually what moved me from being libertarian to being more left, is when I saw how different his life could be just because of things I could financially afford for him versus what it would be otherwise. But for military stuff, that's just so far removed from the average American experience that it's hard to, or I don't think, I don't think about it as much like that. But I mean, like, to your credit, what you're saying is it is still like, that is it's a lot. And there are a lot of people that come back from, and it sounds like, and it sucks too, because people in the military even predisposed towards this. Like if you come back with a wound, you know, like like a missing limb or something, everybody has a lot of sympathy for you. But if you come back, and even if you don't even have a formal PTSD diagnosis, like it feels weak and feminine and horrible to complain about, like, you know, being in areas where you hear gunshots or you're called out to go and fight, and you can't even like emotionally process the fact that this might be the last time you leave, you know, your base in your entire life. Those are hard things to deal with, and I have a lot of sympathy and sympathy for people that are involved in that, because it's hard to talk about it even, because a civilian won't understand, and you don't even have like a diagnosis for a disease, so that's a really difficult thing to deal with. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm gonna be like probably more honest than I would be, because I feel like you're doing the same, right?
I feel like I'm always honest, but go ahead.
You are. But I mean, like, I don't get to, like, it's different watching you interact with other people, and because, you know, I'm trying to meet you in a different place than I think a lot of people come at you. And so,
sure.
But anyway, it can be, I'm trying to pick my words carefully. So I don't want to trauma dump on your stream or whatever, but I was the victim of a violent crime and have horrible PTSD as a result, right? Yeah. This doesn't make me a special snowflake, right? But it did feed my ideology on all of this, right? Yeah. And when I hear stories of soldiers, and conscript or not, that go away, that come back broken like that, right? It's just, it goes all over me, because I understand what that can, you know, I have never been in a war zone, but I had a pretty fucked up, crazy thing happen to me that you won't meet many people, you know, kidnapping, carjacking, held at gunpoint, forced to strip naked, run out into the middle of a field in the middle of winter, you know, told that I was going to die, you know, the whole night. It's horrible. It's hard for me to separate that from how I feel about the broader context of war, right? Sure. I understand it's flippant.
Okay, let's talk about it this way then. What if you lived in a country where the government could do that to you at any point, and it's so common and so permitted that it's not even a story? People just notice you're gone, and then they have to come to their own conclusions. Would that be willing fighting against? Would that be something you would fight a war against? I mean, if you are trying to think of the future your kid's going to be raised in, do you want your kid being raised in a country like that? Nobody goes to war planning to die, but some people are willing to risk it in order to try to hope for something better.
Be like a hippie and put your, like, peace and love, man. I get that kind of, like, in a modern age and from an adult perspective can be cringe. But I'm steeped in that, you know?
Yeah, I understand. I guess, like, here, this is the only thing I guess that I would say to keep in mind is that there are people that have had those experiences, and there are people that have seen other people around them that have had their experiences, and like they still go out and they feel like it's important to fight, or they still go out and they feel like it's important to support the military or be engaged in these activities. So there has to be something bigger driving them. Despite the fact that these are horrible experiences, there's something else going on there, that in Ukraine, there's still so much broad support for the war, despite the fact that so many people have seen so much death and suffering and destruction around them. Like something else is at play there that's worth keeping in mind, that in the West, we just don't really have to think about, you know? Like it's so much different. Like I would even say this, like Iraq and like Vietnam and stuff, like, you know, what's happening there? We have American soldiers going over to another country to fight for a very intangible political, geopolitical, geostrategic mission. It's like, you know, whatever. Like if tomorrow, you know, if my son was 18 and Taiwan is getting invaded, like, I think the United States should do something to stop that. But like, man, would I want my son to go to Taiwan to fight? That's a really rough one. If he really wanted to, maybe. But if my son was 18 and tomorrow, if my son was 18 and tomorrow, right, Chinese troops were landing on the shores of Washington and California and shit, like, I would grab a gun with him. I'd be like, all right, let's go. We're going to go fucking kill some fucking Chinese people, I guess, because holy fuck, like, this is my country that you're invading. It's just such a different feeling. And in the West, we're so insulated from that. Who the fuck is invading the United States of America, right?
No one.
But
our geographic reality makes us a near impossible country to invade. Before you get to the fact that we spend an insane amount on defense spending and have so many guns in this country, and so many people who know how to use those guns in this country.
I mean, like, theoretically, I understand what you mean, though. And to be honest with you, despite our differences politically, I guess, we're the same way in that. Like, if somebody's landing here where I live and trying to take my...
Dylan, PaulsEgo is non-tent. Look, we'll at least wait until Anna's here, and then we'll listen to them interact, and then we'll wrap it up, okay? Because I just want to... Oh my god, they talked for a bit. Okay, we'll see how... I might skip forward in a little bit until when Anna comes in. But we'll see. We'll watch as much as we can bear or deal with, because some of you guys are not liking it.
You know, this society over, despite my critiques of it, and maybe even like my displeasure with it, I'm grabbing my gun and whatever, you know, we're gonna go kill whoever's coming, right? So, like, that's we're together on that, if nothing else. I just don't know how to shake free of it. Like your chat doesn't like me very much.
He's scared of death. I mean, it's the pinnacle human issue. It's the pinnacle problem of the human experience, is coming to grips with our own morality, not our mortality. It's not uncommon. Even those who are willing to go fight get scared.
And that's cool. I understand that, but like, for me, this is an important conversation, because typically when I try and have this conversation, the person refuses to meet me where I'm at all, and even acknowledge the humanity of my position, right? Even if you think I'm wrong, ultimately, prescriptively, you're at least like giving me that, like, fuck, like, emotions are what people run on. So, you know, and I'm not out here trying to be Mr. you know, political streamer or whatever. This stuff just interests me, right? And I appreciate you taking the time to explain that stuff to me.
Yeah, no problem.
You know,
you can also talk to Ukrainians and other people too. Like, they all have their own perspectives as well on it. But yeah,
sure. And I have, you know, I talked to Dylan Burns. I don't know if you know Dylan Burns at all.
I've heard of him.
Yeah. I talked to him a while back, and we had a conversation. And as far as like agreeing on what should have happened or whatever, I don't think we came to an agreement. But it was nice to talk to him, because it didn't immediately escalate into like just shit flinging bullshit, because there's enough of that. I engage in enough of that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. You brought up Vietnam and the Middle East.
I'm an honorary Ukrainian, Dylan the Ukrainian, I guess. It was like Ukrainian perspectives. I talked to Dylan Burns. Okay, I'm the Maryland Cossack, okay? I'm the Crab Cossack, the Blue Crab Cossack. That's the new term. That's my official title given to me by Zelensky. the blue crab Cossack of Maryland.
East and stuff, and that being kind of different. And that's another thing I'm steeped in, right? Is like I came of political age, right?
Maryland Oblast strikes again.
Dawn of.
There's a nice shout out. Look, I mean, I disagree with PaulsEgo on every level of this. I think he's taking Burning Man to like a serious issue. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying that I feel like his I think his perspective is steeped in dreariness and weepiness derived from the brutality of war. But I mean, yeah, war is dreary, but that doesn't mean we can't deal with the reality around us. Ignoring the fact that you have to fight does not remove the need to do it. And so I'd rather look it in the eye.
9/11 and then the insane military kind of actions that came in its wake. And one of the things I've always had a hard time shaking, and people will throw at me, is like, oh, you know, Paul is kind of brain broken, or America bad, I guess is how you guys put it, because of just how awful those wars were and how much malfeasance I think we all agree there was. I don't know. At least I don't know how you feel about that shit. Maybe I shouldn't assume. But you know, I don't know how to shake free of that either, or even if I should. Right? Isn't that like the best predictor of
You don't need to shake free of it, but you don't need to be so willing to sell out other people's freedoms for that feeling in your chest. You know? It'd be one thing if he was like, look, these people want peace and these people are denying it from them. We must leverage this way to get them the peace. But when you're talking about make them concede their freedoms and liberties that might not even stop the war due to its historical trends and where it's going because you don't understand the broader context, that's a reactive, stop the shooting response, which, I mean, I sympathize with, but like I said at the start, and like Destiny said earlier, I think it's naive.
Future behavior is past behavior, right?
I mean, like, there's a saying that, like a cat that touches a hot stove will never put its paw on a hot stove again, but it'll also never put its paw on a cold stove. Like, it's possible that you can have a negative response to something that was bad, and it's good to have that negative response, but just don't overgeneralize it to every other thing. Like, just because something bad happened once doesn't mean every single thing in that domain is always bad, right? There are definitely some things that are worth fighting for, even if sometimes we fought for less than noble reasons in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And so it's one thing to
it feels like Paul's got more mellow on this since we've last talked. I thought he'd go in the other direction, honestly.
Understand that trap or that perspective, and another thing to shake free of it. Right? So much of what I believe in is wrapped up in the desire to prevent harm to people as directly as possible, right? In my mind, if and I'm just gonna say, and like, look, dude, I have no fucking I'm just a fucking hippie in California, so listen. In my mind, if when Putin moved in and was like, I'm taking the Donbass, right? If two things would have happened, we just went, all right, and then went, and now Ukraine is in NATO, right? I think that probably would have been better from...
See, this is the problem. We had, like, the same disagreement last time, but I said, like, I told him last time, and he's saying it still, we can't just do that. America isn't the king of NATO. We can't just be like, Ukraine's in the NATO now, because we said though. So, the French didn't like it, the Germans didn't like it, the Turks never agreed to it, the Hungarians still don't like it. I think the Slovaks would be against it now, maybe. Like, and I still think there's other countries that probably wouldn't like it either. So, like, at the time in 2014, you can't just, like, absorb them into NATO. In fact, the requirement about not allowing countries currently at war to join NATO, that was specifically added to attend for the Ukraine contingency. So there were countries that were not only not in favor of Ukraine joining NATO, once Russia invaded Ukraine, they were even less in favor of it because they saw it as a possible confrontation point. And you need unanimity across the entire alliance. If there was one country, then maybe everybody else could, like, gang up on them and be like, do it, do it, do it, do it. But we're talking like 4 or 5 countries here. And it's not like itty-bitty countries, okay? It's like some of the linchpins of European defense.
My perspective, then you know, 2 million people in the dirt or whatever the running total is over there, right?
Sure. And then for here,
yeah, number keeps increasing every time.
I would just say that on that, there's a lot of just like factual information you have to digest to understand why that would be impossible or not. Like Ukraine wouldn't have been able to join NATO at that point. It would have been impossible for it to happen.
Well, there's like a border dispute clause, right? So you can't join NATO.
There's the fact that there's disputed territory, so they would have had to eject that territory completely. There's the fact that, like, geopolitically, Russia, the response to that would have been, the whole world would have been like, hold on, is NATO just going to start drafting in countries that are involved in conflict? That might set a bad precedent. It could have been that maybe Russia sees that joining as not as legitimate, and now they start testing it. And well, if they can bomb, you know, Ukraine that's in NATO, can they bomb Poland or, you know, the Baltics? And then there's also the fact that to join NATO, you need a unanimous vote. Every single member state has to vote yes on it. It would just, for practical reasons, it would be really, really, really hard.
Is he going to get it this time? I hope so.
And probably not even a good idea for that.
We're not just kings of the world, as much as, you know, we get that image in music and such. You know, the world, I mean, even our allies have control of things.
Yeah.
It's their backyard.
You would support, ultimately, Ukraine being a part of NATO, right? As a Russian border state, it seems like the idea of NATO being a group of Western countries that contain Russia and its expansionist tendencies, right?
Would I join? Would I have supported Ukraine joining NATO in like 2013? Sure, but I don't think ascension to NATO membership in response to conflict, I don't think that's good for a whole host of reasons. It's probably really not good.
Which was the same perspective that Merkel had, Angela Merkel.
It lends to a lot of instability.
Can you give me like the for dummies bullet points of a couple of like the main reasons you'd think that like setting
one thing I appreciate about Paul's ego is when his knowledge on something is shallow, he doesn't like pussyfoot around it or like go around it. He's like, okay, I'm an idiot on this, explain this to me. Now I think that in many people would inspire caution of making or suggesting stuff about a war, but I appreciate that upfront honesty that a lot of online commentators talking about the war do not have and do not show.
Bad. If the ultimate goal is containing Russia, right? That's the pretty old, like open goal of NATO, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dylan Burns, you have a superficial understanding of things? Oh, you know what? I think you're right. I'm wrong. Good talk. That didn't tell me anything.
Then what's the problem?
When does Anna show up? Anna shows up in quite a bit. Oh boy. I don't know how much longer we're going to watch, but she shows up in, if we're at, she's like 15 minutes. We're not going to watch. We'll see how much. We'll watch a little bit more and then we'll skip. A little bit more and then we'll skip. I keep saying that though, but I'm milking. I know I'm milking.
Just like putting that red line and saying like, hey, you put a toe in here, you're basically going to war with the United States, right? That's the idea. I just think
it goes to what I said before, that like, I don't know if every single person would accept in NATO, would allow Ukraine to join. Two, I don't know if it would motivate, if Russia really wants to fight somebody and they know that they're going to join NATO immediately, I don't know if that causes them to mobilize their military in a different manner. Three, I don't know if somebody joining that quickly and in that manner would be seen favorably by the rest of the world institutions. Does the UN look favorably on that? I don't know.
Like a credibility issue, you think? If like we're just
I don't know
using it in reaction to an invasion. Like, sure, but from the perspective of preservation of life in both of these countries, right? We're talking Russian conscripts and Ukrainian conscripts. I think so.
Right? Preservation of life is a byproduct of these international agreements. It's not like you start there and then you move outwards.
I think people don't appreciate the sacrifices and work that it took to get the post-war European peace. It wasn't like passively everyone just acknowledged war was bad and it didn't happen again. If after World War I, Europe was willing to go to war again, then I think you didn't get the message. And you need to put structures in place that it cannot just be moved quickly with the ebbs and flows of populism, the current fad, or expansionist nationalists and revanchists.
Because like, it sounds weird to say this, but like life is not that important. What matters is like quality of life and rights that you're insured. correct? Right? Like, so for instance, like there were a lot of Africans that had life in the United States when they were brought over as slaves, but so what? They were abducted from their family and they were brought over as slaves. Or there's women that have life as sex trafficked people, or there could be people that have life who are subjugated to all sorts. So we're really talking about like an assurance of some sort of rights that allow you to live like a life worth living. So from there, we have these international organizations, we've got nation states, we've got individual countries and ways that they run. And these are the systems that we're looking to protect. There's a ton of ways to quote unquote protect life that doesn't ensure rights and the freedoms of people to live the lives that we think they ought to be able to live. So you would have to start from that.
There's been such a massive diaspora of people out of Ukraine, and then just a massive amount of death in that country, that it's hard for me to imagine them ever going back. Like, it's going to take generations, right, for that wound to heal and for people to come back home and trust that they can come back home after fleeing. Like, it's just...
Which is why it's so important that the peace deal we make is not just slap together and we do Minsk 3 and then make the same mistakes we made before, and instead make it strong, stable, and so not only do displaced people feel like they can return home, but other, investors can feel like they can invest safely so the economy can recover, so that farmers can return and start farming their fields, if they can even get their farm fields back, since many are still occupied. Or filled with mines.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a lot. I understand that, but like when they were under the Soviet Union before, right? They had like literally the Holodomor, which was so many people.
Like a Holocaust, right?
Well, I don't know if I would say it's a Holocaust. I'm just saying there were millions and millions of people that died at gunpoint to things like starvation and stuff, which is why a lot of ethnic Russians live in places like Eastern Ukraine or Crimea today.
Was it enforced starvation?
That's a debated thing, but basically
what's your take on it?
You know what I hear right now? I hear Anna speaking through Destiny, okay? The Anna whispering has well embedded itself in the Destiny's frontal lobe.
I haven't done Vyvanse reading into it, so I don't have a strong take on it. It seemed like there were massive famines, and the issue is basically like, this is oh my god, I'm giving such an uneducated take on this because I haven't done a deep dive into this, but it seemed like
you're not exactly talking to the most educated guy.
Yeah,
so
I understand. I'm saying it for my audience so people don't parrot.
Everyone understands.
Like a hugely educated opinion. It seems like there were massive famines across the Soviet Union, communist countries especially, or countries that were working towards industrialization had issues dealing with famines. And if there was a famine, which there was, if a whole bunch of Ukrainians and Kazakhstanians die as a result, well, then so be it. It's convenient for the Russian Empire. They can move in a bunch of their own people, do their russification programs. They'll requisition and steal food and bring it to, Moscow, which they did. So, I mean, like, was it intentional? I don't know. But, like, don't ever let a good famine go to waste, I guess. That seemed to be, their position on it. So, I don't know. That's how I feel about it. But regardless of why they died or what was going on, like, that was still a huge thing that happened. So, I mean,
I mean, I would think that like, if we're going to talk about like the political expediency of, let's to the last man keep Russia from taking a slice of this country, like knowing what Russia did in this region when these regions were part of the USSR, right, before it fell.
Sure.
It should be part of the conversation. I'm not saying you have to be the guy that looks into that, but it would be interesting if you did, because...
Wait, looked into what?
Well, like what were the political implications of the Holodomor that
I don't think that's relevant for today. I think the thing today is that...
Well, don't you think it is, though? Like, these people, like, just a few generations ago, when our grandparents were celebrating VE Day, were getting fucking starved to death. You know what I mean?
Sure, but I'm just saying that, like, in 91, Ukraine was its own country. That's it. That should be the end of the story. The fact that Russia's invading them now is not good, regardless of what's happened in the past. Like... yeah, I don't think you need to go that far back to justify anything today. But yeah,
fair enough. I'm keeping kind of some bullet points of my takeaways, at least for myself. Right, is that I'm a bit stuck in a way of thinking that isn't very modern, I guess. Mm-hmm. Is the nicest way to put it.
Okay.
Maybe a little boomerish on modern geopolitics and stuff because, well, this is another angle. You know, I'm a '90s kid. Well, '80s and '90s kid. I was born in '80, so I got a little taste of both. And you know, I think you and I kind of like share that. You grew up in the '90s as well, right?
This is another thing why I didn't really respect the PaulsEgo, like, I'm older than you suggestions from the last debate that much. Is, yeah, you were like of the, you know, in your 20s and stuff during the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, during the war on terror, and right at the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union. There is no war that we supplied or were partner to in any way since you were born that is anything like that you experienced in your life. It's on a totally different continent. It's for totally different reasons, and the populations have totally different relationships with the United States. Like, it's so, like, experience in Afghanistan does not necessarily translate into experience in Ukraine. I remember when I was at a canvassing vet in Ohio for the election, there was this veteran that walked up to me from the war on terror. He was in, I believe he was in Iraq, and, you know, he dismantled IEDs on the road, and he was like, I want to go to Ukraine, you know, I believe in the cause, I want to fight, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I was like, look, I will point you in the right direction, but think about it for a bit, because this is not the war in Iraq. This is not Afghanistan. You're not fighting a bunch of people in a cave or a bunch of insurgents that you can lambast from miles away with airstrikes before moving in. You're the underdog. You have less air power. You have less artillery. You have less men. You have less armored support. That's the position you will find yourself in. You will not be under fire and then be able to say, call in an airstrike. You'll have to make something happen yourself, or hopefully rely on the mortarmen or a little bit of artillery that you do have in the area to resupply you, and a possible 113 troop carrier to come by and pick you up if you get injured. It's a totally different war. The rotations are less. You know, it's a completely different war. The threat of drones are different, and that guy ultimately, after reconsidering exactly what skills he had from these wars and that he could apply to Ukraine, he later came back to me and said, you know, Dylan, I thought about what you said, and I think I'm going to find another way to support Ukraine. And I said, do you, man. And it's because it's a very different war, both in how it's fought and the reasons behind it. And so that experience is not applicable one-to-one. Many of the same experts who, you know, were being experts on these Middle East wars for so long went to Ukraine the first few days. They thought the whole country was going to collapse. So, I mean, again, it's a very different war. Whatever. Let's continue. You know what? Well, I keep saying a little bit more, but I'll let this play a little bit more, and then we'll finally go over. Okay? I keep saying a little bit more, a little bit more. I'm milking it. I know.
And like, the idea was don't trust authority, right? Fuck the man. That sort of mentality. Like, government's lying to you. They're all a bunch of fucking white criminal pieces of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And they're bleeding you dry, man. That type, I'm not going to lie to you. That mentality, like, has stuck with me my whole life. I have an inherent distrust of institutions and stuff. And do you think that that is like,
Dylan, what is your goal? Like, generally in life, or like in my video? My goal is to react to this. Actually, my goal right now is to use the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Negatively impacting my ability to like understand this stuff.
It's so hard for people not to be binary, but like, this is what I would say. And everybody calls me like an institutional shill, but what I would argue is, here's what I would say, okay? Like, when you don't trust somebody, like, by default, we should be not agnostic. By default, we should have like an antagonistic view towards these things. But the reason why we're antagonistic is because we know that they're important and we know that they can do well, right? That's why we have an antagonistic view towards them. If we have a friend and they're acting stupid and we're giving them shit for it, you know, it's because we think that they can do better, right? If you've got somebody who's truly toxic in your life, you know, what is the advice? It's not like, well, you need to really go after. It's just cut them out of your life completely. Ignore them, like, right? So when you're antagonistic toward things, because you know they can do better. I'm not saying that we should have like a blind trust towards corporations or institutions or anything like that, but we should like acknowledge that they give us a lot of value, and then you're antagonistic in a way that you want them to do better, and that's it. But it also has to start from this area of not fundamentally thinking that all of them and every person who's a part of them are out to like destroy and murder and kill everybody, right? One of the things that you said when you came to this conversation is you appreciated the fact that I'm not like assuming bad intent from you, and I don't think you're assuming bad intent from me. But when we start from there, for every single person working in the NHS or HHS or every single person working in the FDA, I mean, it kind of fucks everything right at the start, right?
Sure. Yeah. And I don't think of these broader institutional organizations as individuals running them, right? At least my thinking is they are kind of a colony organization that's got bureaucratic responsibility. And so I think we're getting like dangerously close to saying that people resisting the Democrats are hoping for better from them, right? Like,
yeah, but let's not have a false hope. There's a difference between hoping and using hope to fuel revolutionary actions which can change the world and improve our lives for the better, and hoping for a fairy to come down and solve all your problems. So, you know, hoping for an opposition to the Democrats, there's no good opposition to. There's not the Green Party. It's not the Libertarian Party. And when the system is built this way, I mean, if the circumstances permit it, maybe, but the circumstances do not permit it. It's one thing to hope. It's another thing to hope foolishly. Maybe all hope's foolish, but it doesn't need to be brain dead. And I'm trying to be mean. It's just like, we live in the system we live in.
Yeah, but it's resisting in a way that you're still with them at the end of the day, right? It's to quote that, I lean a lot into this, like,
then that's not real resistance. No, if you go like, hold on,
man. If that's not the case, don't get into the Syrian civil war, because when you see how those factions fought, then made deals, fought while making deals, you'll be they're resisting and deal making all at the same time. It's quite messy, actually.
Hold on, give me a sec. If you say, dude, I want you to be better, right? And I'm gonna fight you on this fucking day if you're not better, right? And that day comes and the dude shows up and goes, all right, let's get down. And you go like, nah, dude, I was with you all along. You're not really resisting them, right?
Why are my views opposite? What? I don't know what this question is. I have no clue what you're talking about, Danny.
Okay, there's a saying from old Middle Eastern culture, okay? It has to do with balanced opposition and who you fight in a war against other tribes in the Middle East, okay? And the quote is, me against my brother and I against my cousin, and my cousin and I against the world, okay? So if you're in the Democratic Party and you're talking to other Democrats and you want to fight with other Democrats, then you do that. You fight in the primaries. You critique them when it comes to policy. You know, you try to hold them accountable as much as you can. But when you're looking outwards and it's Republicans attacking you, right? Well, no, you side with the Democrats.
How do you hold them accountable if not with your money and
in primaries? You don't vote for the other team.
Well, what about when there isn't a primary like this year?
When is there not a well, because we have an incumbent, but there are House races, there are Senate races, there are local races.
We had an incumbent, and then
okay,
Biden
then in that case, well, so here is the issue, and this is why it worked this way in the Middle East. If you don't want to play by that same set of rules, that's fine. You die and you lose, because the other side is playing by that set of rules. If you want to betray your family, if you want to betray your brother, or you want to betray your cousin, then you're free to do so. The other side's not going to, though, and they will never betray their brother or their cousin, and their families will always dominate your families. You will never survive.
So the only kind of resistance that you think is useful at all is resistance with no ultimatum.
No,
right?
No. You can.
If you don't, then we will kind of statement, right?
No. You fight in places like the primaries. These are where you fight.
Okay, let's skip later a bit, okay? Because my God, they talk, don't they? Okay, let's skip here.
So he's not. So Hassan isn't held accountable. He's got like a Trump-like media environment, right?
Okay.
Just here we support my view on that, and I don't think there's a single broad study.
Establishment thinking, man.
Producing wait around it.
About known fatties and the chips with food.
Yeah.
I see you ordering McDonald's.
you become more overweight, it becomes really, really, really hard to lose that, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm just, you know, I'm on, like I said, I've lost a lot of weight, and I'm on, you know, my way to a healthy weight, and a lot of it was changing how I eat, right? And so you're absolutely right about that.
I'm on the way to a healthy weight too. I'm just taking the long way around.
It's the psychological journey, getting to the point where you can decouple your feelings from the food, right?
Sure.
That's all I'm.
But I bet like
about.
changing how you eat. My guess is if you're losing weight, a lot of that is moving away from like the super ultra processed food to stuff that's a little bit more satiating as well. Yeah,
well,
for sure.
I stopped eating meat. I do like a pescatarian thing now, right? I was always kind of grossed out by meat, and so I gravitated to the most like processed forms of it, like the hamburgers and the chicken and the pizza. So I just don't, you know, indulge in that type of food anymore. Okay. And that changed the whole way I eat. So yeah, but
sure.
you know, that getting to the point of that is, you know, was tough for me, is all I'm saying. There was like a whole psychological journey that had to happen before I could decouple my feelings from my eating enough to even institute that type of dietary change. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. Hi, what's up?
Hello.
Hello, I'm sorry. I know you moved on from the Ukraine stuff, but I have been summoned. So, Mr. Bonelli, you should do research on Holodomor because it is recognized as genocide by your own country.
Okay.
I know you're not the best, you know, barometers of truth, but yeah, Germany does, France does, Poland does, Italy does, basically everyone of value recognizes it as genocide. You are correct, though, that people debate still whether the famine itself was intentional. That is debated. By the actions that they took when the famine happened are not debated already at this time and age. It used to be, but not anymore, because of the refusal to accept food from foreign aid, because of the mass executions of people who tried.
The continuation of the exports, the stopping of people from leaving the areas where the starvation was the worst. Oh God.
To escape, particularly
the blocking of foreign aid
I don't think I reject any of the facts around that. I'm not sure in terms of being a genocide, but I'm not saying it's not. I haven't done the research there, so I'm not comfortable like saying like 100% because I just haven't done any of the.
But I wish you would. You know, I have sent you the map.
There's a million other. Yeah, I know there's a billion other topics I need to research as well. But yeah, but anyway.
It's the second time.
Monkey boy, research.
Okay. Oh, indeed. So yeah, that's what happened. Also, the mass Russification that happened afterwards.
Dylan, will you talk to Anna someday in this stream? I think it'd be cool. We've had Anna on before during this stream. No, not this specific stream, but on this show before. Yeah, I don't know if we'll have her on again anytime soon. If you guys had any ideas, you can email me questions or such at DylanBurnsTV@gmail.com. Because, you know, we talk regularly in private. We just don't stream it. You know, at least we message and DM and stuff. Watch a movie every once in a while, if I'm in the area.
People also bring up Kuban, which is a region in Russia that was also heavily affected by a lot of people died there, and people bring it up as an argument that are uneducated or are they doing Russian propaganda. They would be like, oh, in that region also many people died, and they also were not prohibited to leave the area to find food anywhere else. But the truth is that the absolute majority of Kuban population were Ukrainians. So that's the argument against them, not for them, because the only region in Russia that was subjugated to such losses of life and prohibited from living was also 75 majority Ukrainian, and most of them spoke Ukrainian, but after half of them died and they have been replaced by Russians and the schools have been Russified, of course they started speaking Russian and things like that. So that is by people like is recognized by even by Lemkin himself, who created the term genocide. So yeah, there's that. Just wanted to indulge to it. You know, I just really want you to do that. Is that medication you're taking? Why? Yeah. Well, take that and do a Holodomor thing. You'll be so good at it. You'll be as good as you always are when you have the knowledge. Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Promise on stream right now.
I promise I'll add it to my list of things to get to.
That's good enough.
Okay.
Works for me. Yeah.
I don't have the political expertise to make a genuine call on this, but I believe her.
Uh-oh.
I think
Well,
she's right about
there you
this.
go.
I don't know my history.
Consensus.
Okay?
We don't have to watch the
Yeah.
rest of it. Brilliant. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow at 6 p.m. Okay, sorry. We'll finish. We'll finish this. I swear. I swear.
See, I'm willing to I'm willing to go with UkrainianAna is right about this one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of the underlying facts. I mean, even more what was said.
At the same time, Ukrainian soldiers speak Russian amongst themselves. Yeah, a lot of them do. A lot of them speak Russian in their everyday life. Azov is a mostly, at least definitely during conception, a mostly Russian-speaking organization in Mariupol because it's a largely Russian-speaking city. I think the language element of the war is often overemphasized.
Like even people that were trying to flee places that were experiencing starvation were shot and killed en masse. And then when those same people turned to cannibalism, the Soviet troops would come in and kill them en masse. So, and then obviously it was an opportunity for Russification, for Russia to ship in a bunch of their own citizens and everything. So like, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of the underlying facts. I'm just not sure about the, for what it qualifies as genocide or not or whatever, but yeah.
Genocide is also like, there has to be like some sort of state intentionality to it.
Yeah.
And there was on the law, the law in Soviet Union that was made. It's like in papers and shit. It's called a Fifth Wit Law, I think, in English, or something of the sort. I know how it's called in Russian. I don't know how it's called in English exactly. But point is that that was a law on the books that said that you should shoot people who try to steal food in Ukraine specific.
Yeah.
So that's, something that you can attribute to government.
And some of that food they were trying to steal was literally being taken from them. It was requisitioned by Soviet troops to take it up to like mainland Russia from the Ukrainians themselves. So yeah.
Yes. And many people, unfortunately, didn't know
like
what was happening.
It sounds like you're ready. You should make a call.
I'm muted, sorry. Muted idiot. Wow, Zelkalix. You're on site chat to bully me. Very mean. Have Anna on monthly? I would need stuff to talk about. I don't want to just have her on to just like pitter-patter around for 30 minutes just to do it, So if you guys can send me topics, I'll make a list of topics and we'll talk maybe. Sure, so you'd say yes.
On this.
Well, I'm aware of the facts of the matter. I don't know whether it qualifies as genocide or not because that's just a thing. But yeah, I'm aware of all the facts of the matter. But also, it also doesn't. It's not like a super relevant thing because
Dylan, take the loss and bow out. Who are you in chat? I have no clue who you are or even what you're questioning me about. But sure, I take the loss, whatever it's about.
Nobody's being persuaded one way or another about anything going on today based on that because people are like, they won't agree with the underlying facts, right? Like if you were to argue with Tanky, they're not going to agree with all the underlying facts and say, well, I'm not sure if it's a genocide. The Tankies will say that like, I don't think that it was a totally natural famine. It happened. Like nobody knew it was going to happen. It was a mistake. And the Soviets made a mistake.
History,
yeah, it's all going to be bullshit. They're not even going to agree on the underlying facts. Yeah.
If you talk to an average Russian person right now, they will say the same. The worst thing they will say is that it was a mistake or something. Like, that it was like they say, what they actually say? That's what I taught in school, ironically enough, is that it was a sort of like
loaner box
miscalculation. Yeah, that's what they say.
Okay, then.
So like a miscalculation because of the industrialization policy that was happening. And and that's all it was, a tragic mistake.
Sure,
Yeah.
Paul's biding his time.
That's basically how. Tankies usually don't say tragic because they like Ukrainians dying, so they just say it was, it never happened, or it was like, something like that.
Yeah, because one of the benefits that for Chinese tankies and for Soviet tankies is they get to say that it was just because they were trying to industrialize, and therefore they can excuse literally every single bad behavior of the regime as a result of that.
Yeah. Basically, or say it was worth it, or it wasn't targeted specifically as well because of they will usually bring up the Kuban example, which, like I said, is quite funny because it nullifies actually if they knew what they were talking about, or maybe they know, they just use it as a propaganda tool for their side, I suppose.
Sure.
Hello,
I see Loaderbox jumping. I'm gonna use yours real quick. One second, back.
Yeah, I just come in to counter all the Kulak disinformation in here.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah.
Wait a minute.
No,
was I led down the wrong?
No. So
I'm
following
the vibes.
I'm probably going to say this with a lot less conviction than Anna because I still have to finish my research on it. So I'm probably just going to say some dumb shit now, so it motivates me to finish. Okay. First of all, using Lemkin's testimony doesn't really mean anything because Lemkin's definition of genocide was radically different from the one that was actually agreed by the UN. So by Lemkin's terms, the Holodomor and what happened in Ukraine and what happened to the rural population would have been genocide even if no one starved, right? Even if there was no famine, because he saw cultural destruction and the targeting of intellectuals and poets and academics and doctors and all that. He saw that as genocide, right? Yeah.
He said that's part of it, yeah.
I think the general, the only, maybe you can tell me about this. The only steelman that I hear from, like, I guess maybe non-tankies and just like, I don't even know, people like, can't even remember their names, never mind. But the idea that with Stalin, I guess the contention is that Stalin, whenever he wanted a group killed, generally, he would just say it. He would write it very clearly. He would sign the order. He'd say a million different things about how fucking subhuman they are, and then he would go and do it, right? But with the Holodomor, it's always like some kind of roundabout way that you get to it. So with the smoking gun policy, which was supposed to be about stopping people who are starving from fleeing their villages, right? That's like the smoking gun policy for, what was it called? Preventing the mass exodus of peasants who are starving. But I think the rationale that was given by Stalin when he signed it wasn't to say like, oh, I want to kill the Ukrainians and all that. It was because they believed that they were stopping people from taking diseases that they were accumulating in those areas and spreading it across the other villages.
You know, if your barometer of whether there was genocide is a person who committed it saying it, then only Hitler will be qualified, or maybe Milosevic from Serbia. But most people committing shit like that don't actually announce that, and neither did Soviets. They were a little less retarded than.
Well, then why did Stalin announce his intentions with other people, right? Like.
Well, he did announce his intentions. There are documents. You can dig it up. I can send you stuff if you want. I think a person actually sent you a bunch of stuff. Lucy, she called. I think she did. She talked with you a little bit.
Yeah, I've got her link. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she did talk to you. She's
small
a Polish
streamer,
trans lady I am friends with. But point is that that there are documents that specifically highlight the talk about the destroying the resistance in Ukraine that was happening at the time. So things like that do exist. They are not though. Oh, to be fair, he never said, for example, with Tatari, I want to destroy them as a nation or like ethnic group. He said they were traitors and collaborators with Nazis. That's why he deported them. So, but that was, obviously a cleansing operation. So, yeah, you can.
Yeah, but at least with Stalin, the intention was to remove that ethnic group. So, that obviously, but unfortunately, that measure of the Genocide Convention never got concluded. So,
Russification also is that you kill people there, and then you replace them with Russian speakers, and you make books and everything in Russian, as they do, and they did do it. Also with Lemkin, I kind of disagree a little bit. I'm not saying he's like, there are other people, obviously. There are Kolchitsky, Snyder, other people to talk about. Kolchitsky, I think, is the best person, actually, to talk about Holodomor in particular, because I think, is the most knowledgeable. And I personally appreciate his take that it doesn't really matter whether the famine itself was intentional or not. It's what they did afterwards is what matters. And to me, that's like the best argument, because talking about the famine itself, you get, bogged down in a lot of details, essentially. But with the Lemkin thing, his was like, he said it consisted of 4 steps, right? So the extermination of Ukrainian national elite, which he considered to be part of genocide, liquidation of Ukrainian Church Orthodox.
You could definitely meet that requirement through the executed Renaissance, when the Soviets were killing tons of Ukrainian poets, authors, philosophers, scholars who were, not pro-Soviet. If they didn't take their viewpoint, then, well, they got the bad end of a rifle. 500 bits from TSW the Shadow Wolf. My family were kulaks, still have the last name, and suffered from dekulakization until we moved to America. This was before I was born, obviously. So as someone who has family history against the Russians, I want to see Ukraine defeat Russia so that everyone can be safe. Ah, yes. Familial blood anger. It always boils hot. See, the real reason I support Ukraine is because I'm miffed about my grandfather's treatment in Nam. That's the true reason.
Which they did. extermination
Not making fun, just saying that stuff actually does, like, it travels down the generations.
of the significant part of the Ukrainian peasantry, as well as custodians of tradition, so like music, language, literature, folklore, that sort of shit, and populating the territory with the nationalities with intent of mixing Ukrainians with them, which would eventually lead to the dissolution of the Ukrainian nation. That's four points he made out why he thought it was genocide. So yeah, but like I said, it doesn't really. Also, you're kind of like arguing with the consensus at this point, which I really kind of like don't understand.
No, I don't disagree with any fact you're saying. It's just that every parameter you just introduced there is evidence of what would have been an older definition of genocide that wasn't adopted by UN, right? These would all be like ethnocide or cultural.
Lincoln is like, Lincoln is like, I just made his points because people know him. I prefer like Kulchitsky, to be honest, a lot, and Snyder as well. But yeah, people just know him, so that's why I bring it up. But yeah, most people, I think, does actually UK. Yeah, UK also says it's genocide, agrees that it was genocide. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I'm ever the subversive.
Yeah.
Loner box in shambles.
Yeah, not really.
Okay, first of all, I will say that appealing to just because the country said so didn't mean shit. But
reduced to rubble.
Yeah,
and cinders and ashes in front of the whole fucking stream, dude.
Nah, he's a smarty one. But yeah, I do think there also have been a lot of like new information that was really
Paul's ego. You know what it is? Paul's ego knows how to choose his battles. He sees that he's surrounded on all sides by AFU loyalists. There's Destiny, there's Anna, Loner Box just came in. And so, he's gone underground, man. He's hiding in the caves. He's waiting for his moment to strike. Like a gorilla.
Recently public from like archives and things like that is worth noting. I can send you a link afterwards if you want. There's a lot of like proof there of the intentionality, which is quite important when you speak about genocide and shit like that. So there are a lot of new stuff, and also a lot of stuff was obviously hidden. Most people had absolutely no idea. I forgot. I think even Kulchitsky himself was like, "It's not a genocide," but then he realized it was when he learned more about it. So I
think some of this is to do with debates over how much grain was actually available to send out and shit like that. Yeah,
I'll come a lot of details. I'm particularly not really even that important in a sense, because it's about the treatment, and that's what Paul, Paul, right? I think, yeah, correct? You brought up, that sort of thing into say, Destiny actually brought it up to say like, 4 million people like died, because of this. Also 4 million people died because of the World War II here, right? So we're kind of used to dying, honestly. But the point is
that
sucks.
I see I see a way for humanity to not have you grow up in a place where dying is just kind of like, we're used to dying. We fucking World War II, World War I, Holodomor. We know how to die over here. I hate that, because there's so many young people in your country that are just never going to grow up because of this bullshit, right?
Yeah, that's one part of the tragedy living in a place that is, with Russia next door. So yeah, that's pretty. I mean, I wish it was different. Of course, I wish there was a generation in my, I thought it would be different. I thought it would, in 21st century, it would not happen, and that we can have like, a better life. But that seems to be the case. So, there is wanting and there is reality. And those are two different things. So, yeah. But I do appreciate Destiny is not here, so I cannot.
I'm here.
He would
Just
not.
hanging out.
Oh, you're here. I appreciate so much like what you said to Paul about it's just so refreshing to see an American who actually understands the mentality of people here. Not to dig at Paul or anything, but I'm just saying. Yeah, it's just pretty. Paul himself said he was like kind of moved by that, because you brought it up in a very good way. Like first time I ever was actually listened to Destiny, and he said that people don't really want peace; they want justice. I nearly like like the single stoic Slavic tear fell from my eyes, you know, because it's so very true, and it's understandable to people, I guess, who are not living in a country that is privileged enough to be safe and to be having like the baddest, biggest army and nuclear arsenal, and nobody will, you know, attack you in that way. So yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
I don't think it
progressive.
I don't think it de-hippified me, like, but it was well put. Like I meant that sincerely. Like,
yeah, it was
like I said, well, when people engage with me, they typically let me get like 10 seconds into what I think.
What just happened? Why are we pulling back? Oh no! I don't want to have to find that again. Fine. Okay, we'll go. We'll advance a little bit. Where were we? Does anybody remember where we were? What timestamp?
And cinders and ashes in front of the whole fucking stream, dude.
Nah, he's a smarty one. But yeah,
okay. I think we're almost there.
And that's what Paul, you know,
way for humanity.
Okay, yeah, here we go. Here's this like hippie bullshit.
So,
I mean, nice stuff.
Seems to be the case. So, since, but I'm just saying that because it's actually
Where was it?
Oh, because
right here, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
I don't think it
progressive.
I don't think it de-hippified me, like, but it was well put. Like I meant that sincerely. Like,
yeah, it was
like I said, well, when people engage with me, they typically let me get like 10 seconds into what I think, and then start calling me a dipshit or an asshole or whatever the fuck, you know, and just like the typical kind of like.
He's not an asshole.
Cut down kind of, and that's how they present the facts, and it's just like, who listens to a perspective when it's couched in like, you're a fucking retard and this happened. Whoa. And then, you know what I mean? Like, how am I? Nobody, right?
Well, but he also, but to be fair, he also didn't know, like, his like proposal when I talked to him was like, we should just make peace happen. And then it was the same proposal like a year later. He's learned nothing about it. So it's like, yeah, people are going to call you stupid if you talk about these issues with any amount of conviction, even if you just sound like you have conviction and then not know some of the basic information that might interrupt that perspective or might affect that peace plan you have, right? And so people, you know, they're not going to react positively to that.
His willingness to just like say it without, you know, making any implications about my belief system or whatever the fuck it was refreshing to see that.
Although I understand, I would say that most people would make, especially if you talk to Ukrainians about that, they would make that implication immediately, not that you're retarded, but that you are pro-Russian and hiding it, because that's what we usually, I'm not saying you are, I don't think you are, but that's why I'm
I mean, if I am, they have yet to mail the check to the address that I provided.
Be the next Tim Pool, okay?
Next tenant media star.
The point is that most people, just so you understand why many people might be, even pro-Ukrainian people who are not Ukrainian, might be quite aggressive about that, is because most people are doing this. Oh, Ukrainians are dying. We just don't want Ukrainians to die. Oh, we just want to stop the suffering, la la, and all of that. They're doing it not because they're genuinely even giving a fuck about the people and the death, right? They're doing it because they just don't want to cut off aid to Ukraine because they want us to be rolled by Russia. So because of that, most people
I don't want you to be rolled. I definitely don't want anybody to be rolled by Russia or anybody else, right?
Well, we will be if we don't have enough support. So,
I understand that. I understand that, and I have argued against, you know, the United States' continued arming of Ukraine
very much.
And the reason for that is just
you said.
Well, the continued armament, right? I'm not against us sending.
Okay, that's just saying it was a fancier word. That's the arming and armament. I don't see the point there in making that distinction, but yes, that's. Oh no, I'm not against arming. I'm against the continued armament. Okay.
As much aid as is needed or possible or whatever, but like the continued armament, the kind of like further armament,
That's what
it's hard for
continued
me
means.
to separate myself from the millions. I don't know how many people, once the tallies are done on this conflict, how many millions of people will be dead. You know,
when the further Russia advances, the higher the civilian death tolls increase. The more major cities and metropolitan areas they're in artillery range in, the higher casualty numbers you're gonna get. Like, it's like war and like civilian death and limiting damage to a society is not limited just by how many guns you send to society. I'm sure if the Poles before the German invasion had 5,000 more artillery guns and 3,000 tanks with well-trained tankers, like, I think that probably would have saved a lot of lives, at least from the Polish perspective, right? It's not as simple as looking at, like, this is a big fire and you have fuel and all you've done is add fuel to a fire. This is a war. It's more complicated than a forest fire.
Here's the thing. You're looking at it from a perspective of a person on another continent.
Yeah.
So for you, the war stops, good, right? So the war ends, great. That's, you know, the perspective of most people. But point is that if the war right now, right this second stops, and for example, my city where I live is no longer bombed, yeah, which seems good.
By the way, someone just said conflict. Conflict, I really despise the word in our context. I do my best in all my writings to use the word invasion, because I prefer the word invasion, because when you say conflict, it kind of neutralizes what it is. Operation is also bad. It's why the Russians call it the special military operation. Don't use the word war, because war is scary. And conflict contains neutrality within it. When you say invasion, well, an invasion doesn't necessarily dictate it being good or bad. They're not typically seen as good things. So yeah, it's framing. From the opening bell of the war, they were framing it.
On, like, you know, on a surface level. But why do you think would I be against that? Because I am. But why would you think I'd be?
Yes. You specifically as a Ukrainian person would be against well, hold on. Against the cessation of hostilities, or
if the war stops now.
Because there is no political outcome in that country yet. It's all up in the air, right? And so basically Ukraine would have to admit that part of Ukraine is now Russia, right?
That's one of the reasons, but definitely not in my even top 5. Okay, I would say.
All right. Yeah, so what would be your reason then?
So reason number 1, that
even if your perspective is, look, we need to try for peace. What happens if it doesn't? Like, peace talks have failed before. Peace talks with the Russians have failed before. Do we stop sending weapons? Try for peace. Peace talks fail. Then what? Then what? Then are you just like, well, at least I wipe my hands of this situation. Like, what do you do then? Because sometimes, you know, they walk away from the table, or the terms are not gonna work because the perspectives are too big, too different. It's almost so different, in fact, that a war could start.
The stopping of it now is a death sentence to my country, because in a time of 5 or 10 years, they will just attack again, and nobody will stop them, just like nobody stopped them before. So we will be weakened significantly, because we will be licking our wounds, trying to restore our power plants. That are 70% of our power is down now because of Russian bombing of the power plants. So we have heat, electricity problem, all of that, yeah. But point is that restoring that is extremely difficult. Restoring cities that have been extremely bombed is also quite difficult. You know, it's quite simple to understand, like, how many shit we will have to. The economy is, like, as in shambles as it is, and it only is hanging by the aid people give us. So we are thankful for that, obviously. But nobody would invest in a country like we are, that everyone understands will be attacked in 10 years or something, or 5 years. We will not be able to join any alliances of any guarantees of our protection in the future. NATO, for example, is not possible when you have disputed territories that nobody will recognize, and, you know, all of that shit. Sure. So that's number 1 reason. So all of the death of my friends, of my, you know, of soldiers, I'm a volunteer at the front as well, all of that would be for nothing. And that's truly the worst thing I can possibly imagine, worse than death, in my opinion. So yeah, that's number 1 reason. That's
horrible, and I'm sorry that you've lost so many friends.
Yeah, well, second reason is that occupation doesn't stop. So just because the active war stops, right? So there's no longer, active fighting, right, in the regions and stuff like that. The areas that are occupied, our people will continue to be occupied. And what will happen is that they will live in a complete and utter isolation, poverty, with zero human rights under Russian occupiers that are... Oh, Loner escaped. Sorry, Loner, we bored him.
Bye-bye.
Under Russian occupation, and currently even the fucking UN admits that rape, torture is systematic.
I genuinely wonder, as PaulsEgo, I thought we kind of covered some of this before, like if your goal with ending the war is to end violence, but the peace that you bring upon is unjust and violent occupation, executions, etc., then like what have you achieved? I believe we've talked about this type of stuff before. Has he just not reflected on it? He's not explored it further? These perspectives he hasn't explored before? Because it does feel like he's kind of like hearing this or registering this for the first time a little bit.
Dramatic issue by Russian occupation and by Russian forces of prisoners of war and of civilians. Civilians in particular, men, women, children, whatever, doesn't matter. Like, actually, people don't really talk about it, but actually more men even suffered from rape than
so what would you say to this? Looking at it in hindsight, right? And maybe looking forward to any further conflicts with Russia. Would it have been better for the United States to just give an all or nothing kind of red line in the sand, like, we're going to put troops on the border? If you lodge so much as a pea shooter into that, we'll look at it as an attack on America, blah, blah, blah. Like that whole, and then like how many millions of people who are Russian would be alive? How many millions of people who are Ukrainian would be alive if we had not sat by, right?
Too much.
Well, I mean, it would assume, yeah, I've been waiting for this for a while. The millions number he keeps throwing out is just, I don't know where he's getting it from. It sounds like Donald Trump talking about the death numbers. But, I mean, like, you can try this. You can try to drop, number one, the presidency was not willing to risk that. And I think there's a general trend of world leaders being very nervous about war between atomic powers. And I don't think that is completely out of cowardice. I think there's a rationale behind it that makes sense. But, I mean, let's say we go through with it. What if they just say, no, we don't believe you're going to do it? And they just go and they keep fighting. So is then the goal to fight the Russians directly? And do we understand the implications that come with that? And would this be a decision Biden makes himself, or would we throw this to Congress? So we would try to get Congress to vote on giving the president the power to declare war with Russia if they do not withdraw. I don't think we'd get that power. Obama couldn't get the power to overthrow Assad. Assad didn't have nukes.
But you're overestimating a little bit the number of people dead. But do you mean like before the whole ordeal, like in 22 or like in 2014, or what time are you saying this should happen?
The 22, kind of like the major incursion where they pushed all the way to the Capitol, and all of that territory had to be retaken. You know what I mean? If America had, because like there was this huge border buildup right before it, right? It's not like we live in a world where Russia can build up that amount of artillery and tanks and soldiers to just sweep in. So it's like we knew it was happening. America definitely could have mobilized local troops, right, and just been like, okay, now what? You know what I mean? And I don't think Russia wants to be turned.
Here's a question. If the Russians thought that our troops would invade then, and then we did, and we did this as a bluff to scare them off, could that have increased Russia's original troop total that they used to invade Ukraine, therefore possibly gaining them more success if we pussy out and don't pull the trigger? Which I would say would be pretty likely in a situation like that. A lot of variables.
Turned into a nuclear parking lot any more than America does. So would that have been better?
I just don't know. It's like, my main thing is I hate war. I hate death. Death is terrible because of war, and that's why war is bad. Also, let's try the option that risks war on much a larger scale that makes the millions number that I'm saying actually plausible and possible. I mean, yeah, you have the chance of hitting a nat 20, but I'm not rolling a d20 for the health of the globe.
Right, in retrospect.
With such low odds.
Then would it be a better foreign policy for America to adopt going forward, however this conflict works out, right?
Well, I mean, obviously, it like sounds like a fantasy land. You know, someone sweeps in, saves their ass, nobody dies. But it's just deeply unrealistic. Like, America now is there like isolationist bind, as is like quite a lot of other countries. They don't want to directly fight with Russia whatsoever, and we're not asking them. Even Europe doesn't want to. Never mind the United States that is on another continent and has a
so from an uninformed on the local politics perspective, right? What good is it? And Destiny, I want to know your thoughts on this too. What good is it being the biggest military on the planet? And when it comes to however you said I'm overestimating the deaths, but however many people are dead because of this, right? The difference between that and a broader expansion of Russian influence, like how would it have not been better for us to flex that muscle via just putting NATO troops or American troops with a NATO fucking backbone on that border and saying you shall not pass?
You know, I'm not exactly against the idea. I don't know if I'd say we will invade, because I don't think we will. I don't think we will. Right? But the idea of more troops have been deployed to the region as a silent bluff of what might happen might have been more impactful in 2014 if we had prior knowledge than necessarily 2022. But it's not something I will reject on its face. I mean, it could potentially do something. But it could also just mean the Russians increase their invasion force because they're scared of it failing, or us thinking we can quickly move in with like 50,000 troops to repel it.
I'm not saying it wouldn't be. It's just a Lord of the Rings sort of fantasy, and
why?
I'm saying you would never have done it.
Why is mobilizing?
She's right. She's right. The most we could do is a bluff, but But if the Russians go forward and we don't pull the trigger, then we've degraded our own credibility. So I don't even know if an American presidency would be willing to risk that.
Putting them on a border, a Lord of the Rings fantasy.
Then again, if you just put them on the border and don't say anything, you keep it vague enough that maybe you don't degrade your credibility. Trashermancer redeemed on-screen celebration for 40 bits. I don't even remember having that reward. What would an on-screen celebration be? Okay, here you go. There you go. You got a light show. That is a celebration of sorts. I hope you all feel joy, like Patches does.
But
because we're not in NATO.
Because NATO is supposed to only protect NATO protects NATO countries.
Yep.
So your real enemy here is NATO.
No, NATO protects NATO countries.
NATO's but NATO doesn't Ukraine border NATO countries on the western side?
We border it, but we're not in NATO. One of the main reasons of 2014 was invasion Russia did, and annexation was not to let us be in NATO, so we are not protected from their invasion.
Okay, so fuck the NATO troops, American troops then.
Okay,
good old boys in fucking red, white, and blue.
This is the issue, okay? Imagine you've got like 10 people at a bar, okay? And imagine 2 of these dudes carry knives with them, all right? When these guys go to fight other people, all right, they don't have to pull their knife out because they know that nobody else has a knife, so it's okay. It's just going to be fist fighting. Right? Nobody's going to get killed in any of these fights. There's 2 guys with knives, but nobody else has knives, so nobody's going to get killed, okay, because everybody's going to be fist fighting, because that's the rules. That's what they understand. However, if the 2 people with knives start fighting each other, well, now it gets really scary, because now there's a temptation, knowing the other side has a knife, that they're going to pull their knife out, and now you have like a knife fight where everybody might be getting stabbed. There's a huge...
Atomic weapons are most useful in dissuading others from using atomic weapons and as a leverage. But if we like deploy troops into the country, which again, I don't think that we're in fantasy land, but if we did, or we threatened to, we'd be betting the Russians' belief that we'd actually do it, and that we'd be willing to escalate it to the atomic level if they call us on our bluff, or like versus like our ability to bluff. Like it's a big risk. It's a big risk.
Huge escalation there that nobody in that room is interested in seeing, because it starts to call into question, like, you know, the end result for any fight that happens between the two. That's the reason why NATO and then the Russian sphere of influence exist in a world where they're never supposed to.
It's not a knife fight, though. The dudes with knives are not going to attack if it's not a knife fight, though.
I don't understand what you're saying.
There's no such thing as a knife fight with America, dude. We've got the biggest dick on the planet.
It doesn't. No. It doesn't matter how big your dick is.
No. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Everybody has when two nuclear powers have nuclear weapons, the knives are the nukes. You can't go to war with each other because everybody just gets blown up. Everybody gets obliterated. So
I don't know why that broke up a little bit.
It doesn't matter. Everybody has when two nuclear powers have nuclear weapons, the knives are the nukes. You can't go to war with each other because everybody just gets blown up. Everybody gets obliterated. So the whole point about making these complicated, like, supranational entities like NATO is to avoid people like Russia and the United States ever going, like, directly, you know, fighting head to head with each other. That's the point.
I understand that. I understand nuclear aversion, right? But I just don't see. I don't know, from a perspective of...
Dude, PaulsEgo is so hard to pin down. It's like on one second he's like Jill Stein wrapped up in Code Pink, wrapped up in Burning Man, and then the next second he's like, Curtis LeMay, deploy the troops, the Russians are bitches, they won't do anything, and if they do, we'll show them our big man and little boy. Like, it's like, what is this spectrum of foreign policy belief?
Of it being provocative, right, for the United States to involve itself in that way, and that's why NATO is there as a buffer state, right, or as a buffer organization to keep so that America can work through NATO to ultimately achieve the containment of Russia.
Well, I don't know if NATO would be the buffer state, because it would be the thing between them and the alliance they disagree with NATO that would be the buffer state. Traditionally, Ukraine was referred to as one of the buffer states.
NATO is not a buffer. NATO is NATO. Like, if you fuck with NATO, you're fucking with. It's. Well, I think the term is a nuclear umbrella.
Then what is the difference between us putting American troops on the border and having a red line with Russia, saying you're not going to set a toe into Ukraine?
Because Ukraine is not in NATO.
Okay, so why doesn't the United States make a treaty with Ukraine that precludes military incursions from Russia?
So an individual unilateral defense pact instead of a NATO defense pact. Okay, this is actually something that is talked about. See, just through stumbling around the topic, he's gotten to a proposal that is at least theorized about. Okay, we've gotten somewhere, kind of.
So
well, we did have it.
It's a complicated question, but
the Budapest Memorandum was kind of like that, but it wasn't a defense pact. It was a memorandum of understanding that we would send support in a time like this.
Like,
well, here's the problem that I have, and maybe this is simplistic thinking, but the end result of that complicated question is 1 million people fucking dead. And a bunch of
you have to stop looking at you have to stop looking you have to stop looking you have to stop looking at just like the people dead, because there could be way more people dead depending on what's going on. Okay, yes. That's it's not just like a
profit. I'm looking at the profit incentive too of the American weapons
it's
companies
not about that. It has nothing to do with that. This is almost completely totally disconnected and unrelated.
It has nothing to do with
here's the issue. Without getting into complicated issues that even I don't understand fully because I haven't done the research, the reality is Ukraine can't join NATO or couldn't join NATO in the past because Russia might want to fuck with it in the future. That's the actual answer. So if Ukraine made a sincere and serious bid to join NATO, which was almost inconceivable prior to at least 2014, Russia still felt like they had some kind of control.
There was a little bit of talk in 2008, but there was still a bunch of holdouts that made it not really conceivable, and so it became agreements of like collaboration, less than agreements of defense.
Bankrupt man.
Hey, new subscriber Wunktober, thank you so much for dropping your Prime in Twitch chat, taking your Amazon Prime, which you can connect to your Twitch account. For a free sub, you can give to any channel that costs you nothing, but helps pay the bills over here and helps us do embeds. Or you can go to Dylan Burns TV, join Wolski, Skolzieks, Philip Augustine, Dense Pixel, Zirin, and all the rest of them. And you can have your messages on screen. And when you donate there, none of the money goes to YouTube. None of the money goes to Twitch. Every single dime goes towards either paying for staff or funding future embeds out east. I want to go film with more FPV crews. I want to go film with more air defense teams. I want to go film with Bradleys and Leopard tanks. And there's a lot more I want to film before I go home next month. But that takes money. And any donations you guys want to drop off here, I'd greatly appreciate.
Politics of that country, whether it was through Yanukovych or whether it was through...
Does a primer pay for a meal in Ukraine? Well, a primer is like $3.50, right? If a primer is $3.50, yeah, it can buy me like buy me like a small lunch, I think. Like from a gas station or something. Yeah. Maybe like a few apples. $3.50.
Poroshenko, I think.
Poroshenko was after Maidan. No,
no, it was Yanukovych. There's Yanukovych to Poroshenko to Zelensky.
Our leaders probably, but I don't know. But like, the reality is that like Russia feels like they have some control there, and if they join NATO, what you're basically saying is when a country joins NATO, what we're saying is this piece is no longer on the board. You're not allowed to mess with it anymore, and Russia probably would never accept that when it comes to Ukraine. So in your mind, you're right in that if Ukraine was in NATO, they wouldn't get attacked. But the way that would play out is like,
Siren
okay,
got a tier 2 subscription. Wow, so good.
Whoa, so good. Thank you, Zyron. I appreciate the tier 2 sub. And on site chat of all places, he knows what he's doing. He's a man of intellect.
And you want to join NATO? As soon as you say that, Russia's like, oh, well, we're full on invading every part of this country because that's never going to happen. That's the issue that you run into.
Okay. Okay. So what if there was ceding of some border territory to Russia?
Hey, $3.50. Lunch is on me. Look at that. That's going straight towards... I like the noodles they serve at Oko. That stuff's good. Noodles and a Coke. Noodles, a Coke, and maybe some nuggets.
If there was ceding of some border territory to Russia on the table for the NATO, like what if that was part of the arrangement, right?
You would have to cede so much that Ukraine is losing. There's two huge problems with this. One is there's probably never enough that Russia would be happy with.
That is the thing. When people say, okay, just give them what they hold on to now. Number one, Ukraine has Kursk. Why wouldn't we trade land for land? Number two, that means there's like regions that are going to be like half occupied and so many people that can't return to their homes, including cities where they did horrible atrocities. Number three, the Russians are still demanding the city of Kherson where they're doing the human safari. They're still demanding the city of Zaporizhia. They're still demanding more land. And so if they're still demanding more land, it could be that they won't accept the land they have now. They still want more. I mean, ideologically, the Russians can justify this war, and Putin can justify this war himself through saying that Ukraine is an extension of Russia and it cannot exist outside of being an extension of Russia, and to allow it to exist as part of the West is to allow it to exist as a weapon against Russia. Therefore, it must be destroyed. And either it must be made a proxy of Russia or conquered. So
this is a grown man thinking of America from a comic book perspective. Foe crying for millions dead and yet not understanding of consequences of direct confrontation between nuclear states. Stay cool, Dylan.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, look, and like I don't know. I'm used to the atomic take of like, do we really want to trade Kiev for Baltimore? I'm used to something like that. But, I mean, this is just regurgitated. Do you want to trade Berlin for New York? Will the Americans, or as the French would put it, will the Americans trade Paris for LA? And it took steely determination and expert statescraft to try to avoid a scenario they've never experienced and calculate what would happen if this thing that they have no sample data from, because they've never been an international atomic war of like this just hasn't, because the only two times they've been used in anger was when there was only one atomic power, the United States, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so usually I'm used to dealing with this question of like Kiev for Detroit. I'm not used to someone going from war is bad, I hate it when people die, so I mean take that dice and roll it with the nukes. It's like it's a deviation to say the least. It's a deviation. I I just wish you could work a little bit more grounded. Like, at a certain point, like, your freedom is worth fighting for. At a certain point, your civil rights are worth fighting for. It's going to be hard to be a fierce progressive arguing for your rights if everything stops at the, ooh, this might get a little violent, or somebody could get hurt. Because even though nobody wants to be violent in their own country against their own people or against anyone, the threat of violence needs to exist to keep those who would be violent otherwise in check. I.e., you must be armed to stop other nations from thinking they can take advantage and invade you. Or a nation must feel a pain when they invade and try to conquer another nation. If Russia went, these are the wars that nations like Russia have to lose. The imperial wars, the colonial wars, the war of conquest and land taking, and the first step in empire building. These are the wars they have to lose, both for the Ukrainians and for the Russians' own good. So the Russians do not spend the next 30, 40, 50 years sending their men halfway across the globe or to conquer more and more land in Europe under this empire building scheme that doesn't benefit them. Benefits maybe the government, but it certainly is not benefiting the people charging in the machine gun lines, unless you're going to talk about the family's death payment.
And two, if there was a part that Russia would be happy with, it would be so much of Ukraine that would be ceded that you have like 30% of the country left after enough that they feel like they're secure. They probably were going to want to take over a whole bunch of Ukrainian industry, agriculture. They're going to want like a land bridge to Crimea so that they have access to the sea unobstructed. Like it's going to be so much that at that point it's like, and then it's also the idea of like, well, fuck, why the fuck would we give up part of our country?
Why the fuck
like,
should we, though?
yeah, would Ukraine want to be in NATO if it meant giving up so much of their country anyway? Like at that point, they might as well just lose it to Ukraine in war.
But also, Zelensky talked about this in the Sky News interview. This offer, while he didn't even seem like he'd shoot it down at all, like the idea you would trade NATO membership for giving up some land. Probably not all of it that they've controlled, but some land. The problem is, or at least temporary control, because you'd have to go through the Ukrainian constitutional process and get an absolute majority Rada vote, their parliament, in order to change the constitution to make it so you can give up land. Because currently, the president, Zelensky, doesn't even have the authority to do so. That right lies with the people of Ukraine and their elected representatives. But assuming that you did that, I mean, like, you still haven't gotten that proposal. This isn't like this is something that they've talked about maybe. But the Russians, from their perspective, they want to stop NATO's expansion. And NATO is the only project in Europe that has proven 100% effective in stopping the Russians from invading you. And so you have the conflict of interest that make negotiations difficult.
Is occurred.
John Brown Enthusiast has donated $6.66.
Wow, the evil number.
The solution to the Ukrainian question is thus: give Ukraine Special Forces AM-29 Davy Crockett weapon system for every Toyota Helix.
For every Toyota Helix they can afford.
Is an immoral, morally corrupt,
and many boxes of gargoyles. Well, you know, people, you know, talking about the re-atomicization of Ukraine might feel a little bit like a meme, but there are Ukrainians who discuss it seriously. I mean, if they signed an agreement to give up their nukes under the idea that their territory would not be respected, and now it's not being respected, do we really think that Ukraine cannot achieve what North Korea did?
Then have NATO strip it from them.
Here's the thing. I agree with everything you said, but also there's like most of our industry and of our money-making resources are all in the east and south, which are coincidentally the parts that Russia wants the most. So that's like losing of that is just losing our entire ability to be independent.
I don't know if that's true. I know there's a lot of, for example, farmland, a lot of coal mines, metallurgy work that comes out of Pokrovsk, for example. But I don't know if it's necessarily the most productive, especially with Ukraine moving forward, burgeoning tech sector, military defense industry. I'm not saying that it isn't important. I'm just saying I don't know moving forward if it could be the only place where they could make as economically productive or more economically productive, depending on outside investment and, you know, smart economics. But I'm just saying that it is a lot. I just don't know if it is the most.
Country and to have any sort of like economical prosperity whatsoever.
Well, one way or the other, right? I see Ukraine as an ongoing like economic project for the United States from a very cold perspective.
Wait. But why?
Like one way or the other, the United States is going to be investing in Ukraine for a long time.
Yeah, but
right?
hold on. But Ukraine and Poland and Hungary and Romania and these Eastern European countries, they don't want to be projects of the West. These are places that have plenty of industry, talent, plenty of natural resources. Like, these are countries that can exist and even thrive given the right governments and lack of corruption on their own. Why would they want to just be projects?
It seems like we're dancing around the fucking shit here. It seems to me like we're dancing around the real issue here. The real issue is that Russia is a hugely ancient, lumbering beast, and needs to be fucking countered at every fucking possible like angle, right? It needs to be stopped, right?
Yes, I agree. Give us weapons.
Well, that's the thing, is like you blowing yourselves out to the point where now it's like people are saying,
blowing yourselves out has donated $7. See, solution to the Ukrainian problem is thus: we must simply equip the 3,000 Black Bradleys of the ZSU a pintle-mounted M29 Davy Crockett.
You really thought the getting them back tactical nukes, you really thought that through, huh? Thank you, John Brown enthusiast. Well, you know, that article said they'd have enough for about like 100 to 200 atomic weapons, 1/10 the size of the weapons we dropped on Japan. So, I mean, yeah, that's painful. You got to fight the Russians on every front. You hear that, guys? You hear that, guys? You got to root. The only way to bring peace to Europe is for the FSA to collapse Russian lines and Assad's lines in Syria. You heard it here first. Fight them everywhere. And hey, I mean, how much we want to bet Ukrainian intelligence operatives are not getting a little, you know, a little crazy over here? We got reports from over a year or 2 years ago of them thinking about it too.
Trazamancer has donated $5. Gundams for Ukraine.
Gundams. Look, I'm willing to compromise with the next administration and simply settle for GoBots, but nothing less.
Stopped, right?
Yes, I agree. Give us weapons.
Well, that's the thing, is like you blowing yourselves out to the point where now it's like people are saying like, hey, you should conscript 18-year-olds there.
Oh, that's
right?
America says that. We didn't agree to that.
You guys aren't doing it. I'm just saying that like America is like, hey, get your teenagers involved, right? I don't
like that either. Let me be like for real with you. Only because it's not a fair deal. If they were like, listen, we give you like 2% of your budget, of our budget, we give you like 3%. 5%, whatever. No, I don't know. Enough that you need. Like, we give you planes, we give you long-range missiles. They just recently, only recently, almost 3 years of all-out war, they gave us their permission to use long-range missiles, which incredibly affected us already, especially me in Kharkiv, in terms of how much I'm getting. Just listen to this. So if they gave us everything we needed and more, and then said, but you have to fully commit to this fucking war, like throw fucking everyone, this needs to be like a short war that you win fast, that's one thing. But they didn't give us shit in last year.
This is the thing that gets me. When Jake Sullivan is in his interview saying, we provided the tanks, you provided 31 tanks. The thing that was really important there was establishing the standard that Western tanks could be sent. Like, they held back the MiGs at the start. I was like, oh, we approved F-16s. Yeah, but we didn't send any. We have the most F-16s of any country in the world. We haven't sent a single one. Denmark sent 100% more F-16s than we have. So there is a question to be thrown out there. If Ukrainian soldiers are currently fighting on the front lines with trucks and Ladas, and Bradleys and, well, you know, good armored vehicles from the West are more likely to save the lives of these soldiers, and Ukraine is a country that's already gone through post-Soviet demographic collapse, then the question should be, not just do we throw more men at this, if you make it a Soviet population versus population war of mass mobilization, the Russians are going to have an advantage on the playing field. Yes, Ukraine has to deal with the mobilization problem. Yes, that means the ending of normalcy for many people in Ukraine if they want to solve this issue most directly. But if you're making this request to the Ukrainians, it has to be done with the respect and understanding that they are now dealing with the cream of the crop of their population, a country that's came into a demographic collapse and they don't have many young people to send in the first place. It's why the average age for both sides is quite high, in the 30s and 40s of their soldiers. So if you're going to take the cream of their population, you're going to take the youth of their population, which you don't have a lot of, and endanger the demographic future of Ukraine as a state, then you're going to have to protect that valuable asset, that people. And that means good equipment, good training, and decent commanders. And while we can't, you know, necessarily change the commanders, we can, of course, advise and train. We can help with some Western training, and we can certainly help when it comes to better armored equipment. This means congressionally approved aid packages, like the $24 billion one that Biden just proposed. But if you really wanted to be serious, it would have to be in amounts of money a little higher. If we wanted to fight this war like we were fighting it, and we were respecting the lives of these soldiers like we respect the lives of our own.
They prohibited other people from giving us shit. UK, for example, UK wanted to give us permission to use their Shadow Storm missiles for a while, but United States didn't agree to it. So they sabotaged our aid from other countries as well. But they also demand that we throw 18-year-olds on the front. That's the bad part.
Well, that's the profit motive that I was trying to talk about earlier, that everybody said I was a dumb cuck for bringing up, but whatever.
Well, I didn't say so, but I'm just saying that that's...
Yeah, I know you didn't. I was just arguing with the chat, which is never a good idea. Fuck you, chat.
Oh, I see, yeah. I don't see chat right now. Hello, by the way, DGG. But yeah, point is that just that's unfair in itself, obviously, right? That's quite a demand. If you want to demand things, then you have to also provide things, in my opinion. Just demands, you know, is not something we enjoy. But it's not about the it's just I understand you want like this better thing, better world and things like that. And obviously I would prefer my, for example, my to not be bombed every day. Obviously I would prefer that. But but it's just not just exactly how the world works, whether you like it or not. And also what we can do is stand against Russia, and we had insane success with it in terms of just how
has donated $20. Keep it up. Also, have you played any Stalker 2, and if so, thoughts?
Look, I'm a little bit of a Stalker fan. I'm a slight, tiny Stalker fan. I played 50 minutes. I have opinions. The AI is janky. They can see through everything. It needs to be reworked. The AI software they said they were going to be using is currently not active. I think the code's in there. It's just not properly activated. You know, it's buggy, but it's Stalker 2. I always suspected Stalker to be released buggy. Stalker's always released buggy. The thing that angered me the most, and I said this last time on stream, and I'll say it again, is the lore changes. Why would you make it so that when you take the artifacts out of the zone, they do not work? In Shadow of Chernobyl, Call of Pripyat, all the previous Stalker games, there were mercenaries that came to the zone to fight and die in order to collect these artifacts to sell them to foreign buyers because of their mysterious powers. If they no longer work when they get taken out of the zone, then how do you justify the existence of these factions or the 2 to 3 previous games that clearly stated that there were the people here to hunt these for money? It doesn't make any sense. And that's a lore mistake they make in the first 5 minutes, and there's no, like, oh, we were impacted by the war, like, justification for that terrible lore change. That is the one thing that's really bothered me so far. So far, though, I do like it in modern graphics. The guns sound good. Gunplay isn't too bad. Oh, and the voice acting's not bad. I've heard some people complain about the voice acting, but I think the Ukrainian voice acting is quite good.
They want to just, you know, everyone predicted will fall apart in a week and they will take the entire country, right? It didn't happen. It's nearly 3 years now. And yes, there is a stagnation, and also there is a huge difference. Yeah,
the thing I was complaining about, that they don't have it enacted as A-Life. You know, they said they were going to have it in the game, and it's not active, so I can complain about it. You say it's in the game, it's not there. Also, like, they said there was going to be, I think they did say there was going to be multiplayer support, and I'm sure the modders are going to handle it, but I'm of the belief that you shouldn't have to leave it up to the modders. That's how Bannerlord, the Bannerlord games, or the Bannerlord, you know, the more modern release of Warband, they were able to just, like, abuse the storyline, don't have to develop it at all, don't develop the main story, leave a bunch of holes in it, and then just put out a bunch of pitter-patter patches because you didn't want to put in the proper work to finish the game and just expected modders to pick up your slack and laziness. I don't like that.
And they will take the entire country, right? It didn't happen. It's nearly 3 years now. And yes, there is a stagnation, and also there is huge difficulties with limitation. We're not getting aid from Europe and United States on time at all. We've been thrown like 3 tanks against 300 tanks. All of that is definitely a problem. But there was a moment.
You're such a gamer, Dylan. You're fired, High Progressive. You can't be my editor anymore. You're fired, and you will be disappeared. I run my job like Hussein, okay? And everyone will clap. Everyone will clap. Yeah, Dylan, good decision, yeah. It'll be like, what was that? That crazy Saddam execution?
They had one choice, and that is to be loyalist, extreme loyalist, and to pledge their fealty to Saddam Hussein. You have this ecstasy.
It's crazy. You get like, so what, that's the thing that baffles me, is they execute like 10 people, one after the other. And at the end, the people who are left are just like, yeah, love Saddam. They're just too, whether they love Saddam or not, the ones who don't are just too terrified to do anything else. So there's just an explosion afterward of claps after they just watched all, like a good percentage of their friends just get dragged away to be executed for a coup and plot that probably wasn't even real. It's crazy. And Saddam sure was a interesting fella. I think one of his stupid decisions was not allowing access for inspectors and hampering them and hampering the international community to help imply that he might have atomic weapons to act as a deterrence. Because, I mean, high-ranking people in Saddam's inner circle didn't even know if he actually had nukes or not. And they had to, like, ask him at one point when the invasion was coming up, like, so, do we have them? And he was like, you don't know? No, we don't know, sir. No, we don't. Because it was generally not known if they actually had atomic weapons. Obviously, Bush was wrong about it. The program was gone forever. But Saddam wanted the specter of the program to add to Iraq's deterrence when it ended up just helping to provoke the United States.
As well, where we have like insanely high morale, insanely high investment in war, and everyone who participated in it. Like, just think about it. Like, in the first year of this war in 22, right, and half of 23, all
the issue was with YouTube, not Twitch. Oh, okay. Well, I'll look into it afterwards about the rating issue for YouTube.
Practically all people on the front were volunteers. So that was people that went and volunteered. Right now, it's not like that anymore. There is mobilization, right? But but first year and a half, it's actually, people don't really talk about it, but it's actually like miraculous if you think about it. We didn't need mobilization for such a long time facing off Russia that is 30 times our size. Right. Because how many people went there on the front lines? Like in my city, on the first day of invasion, lines of people, kilometers of people, okay, enlisting. So it's just, that was the moment, right? But the stagnation
so what topic is Destiny fully researched so we can get a straight answer from about something? Anything related to Israel-Palestine, anything related to COVID and vaccines, anything related to probably like the current Ukrainian-Russian war, anything related to I think the January 6th stuff or a lot of Trump admin stuff. What do you mean? There's a lot of subjects. I just don't know everything.
It's not like it's a unique thing.
Wow.
But what I'm saying is that's realistic. Helping us.
Couldn't hear anything.
Realistic. So, like Nordic countries do now, you know, they're actually like quite invested recently in our success with F-16 and Patriots and all of that. But that's what you can do. You can't reverse back and say, oh, Ukraine should have been allowed in NATO or American troops shouldn't been there. Should be, don't help me, okay?
Here's my understanding of this, right? And I'm gonna try and say this in a way that isn't like flagged off of every type of social media ever. Okay, so we're gonna use a metaphor. Okay,
you just say the thing. Just say the thing. We don't need a metaphor.
No. I don't think we can say the thing.
Why not?
I don't think I should say the thing.
What's the thing?
Okay, America has the bleeding edge of bleeding edge when it comes to military shit, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds to me, it's like, wouldn't it be better in the long run for everybody, for people that are living under the regime in Russia who don't want to be, right? For these border countries that want to be their their own people and their own countries and interface with the economy?
Already, we have history.
You understand. That was, I understand that the language is very, I didn't mean it that way.
Okay.
God, man. PaulsEgo would clamp. He'd have a Joe Biden-ass performance if he had to debate on the presidential stage. He should run for president. I'd fund it. I'd fund that campaign.
I mean, you want the right to be who you are, right? You want the right to your country, for that country's
to be like everyone else.
Right. For the country's borders to be respected, for you to have, access to the global economy and a flourishing, right? But here's the thing. We do Operation Simultaneous Hydra Head Slice, okay? We know where they're keeping these nuclear weapons. Boom, boom, boom.
Sure.
Well, no,
right?
We don't.
Wait. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't wrong. His position is, oh my God, war's so bad. Stop all the war. Save every life. Kumbaya. Beat the drum. Burning Man. Save the whales or whatever. And then on the other end, he's Curtis LeMay. He's ready to firebomb Japan and burn it to the ground. And quick is better than long and painful. Like, oh my God. Dude, this is a mixture of Jill Stein and Tecumseh Sherman. That's a wild combination. That's a fascinating combination. My God. He's Sherman and Jill Stein. It's like, the reason, for those of you who are curious about why that wouldn't be a good idea, is we don't know where they all are. A lot of these silos are presumably empty, and we don't know where every single silo is. And the ones we do know, some of them could just be there to make you waste nukes against empty silos. And the chance of us catching all of the nukes is really, really low. And so we'd have to accept that there is a high likelihood that some will get through, that will miss them, will miss the Archer, and when the arrow's coming towards us, the ICBMs, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles, will probably miss a few as well. And if you're willing to accept possibly millions of dead Americans to roll this dice, and not to mention dead Russians, dead Ukrainians, probably dead Europeans, possibly dead Asians as well, depending on how the war spills over and who participates. So it's literally, he's like, go big or go home. If he was playing Texas Hold'em, every round would be him either folding or going all in. No in between. Go big or go home.
No.
Why not just try to establish escalation dominance and whatever. Look, I'm missing something clearly. He's on another plane of existence.
Nuclear weapons. Boom, boom, boom.
Sure.
Well, no,
right?
we don't. No, that's the whole point of nuclear weapons. You don't know where they are.
Okay. Then step one is, why the fuck don't we know where they're keeping their nuclear weapons?
Okay.
I'm sorry. I like this, okay, guys, here's the plan to end the war. We're going to go to where their nukes are, we're going to bomb them, and we're going to take them out. Yeah. We don't know where all their nukes are. Okay, new plan. We find out where their nukes are. Come on, man.
Okay, so there's a concept called the nuclear triad, right? Which means you can launch nukes from different places. Like
the Russians should tell us where their nukes are. And that isn't fair that we don't know.
Air, land, or sea. There are nuclear subs that are supposed to be in the ocean.
I understand all that. There are submarines, there are airplanes, and
so there's no way that we can find. So we don't know where all the nuclear subs are, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Well, that's problem number one, man. Right? Operation Simultaneous Hydra Head Cut requires us to locate these nuclear weapons.
Let's just go for 10 more minutes, okay?
Where are they at?
Marvel, and it's very cool. Like, it's very Marvel comic thing. But I'm just trying to ground you in reality, okay? And reality is that nobody's going to nuke anyone for Ukraine. In fact,
I'm sorry. I feel like if the reality is we can arm any country against any other aggressive country with the top of the line shit that we've got, right? I think that the reality is we could do what I'm talking about, or some fucking functional version of it, right? Where it's like we use the might of our military and the might of our fucking satellites and our jets and our own counter offensive shit, right? I think that like us eternally supporting border skirmishes.
It's not
right?
a border skirmish.
Well, okay, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean like, I'm just talking about like
I understand that for you it is just some, I don't know, Donbass and Zaporizhzhia, who cares? I understand that. That's not news to me. I have been talking to Americans, unfortunately for me, for a long while. It's just I just am trying to make it clear that the entire nation is at stake right now for us.
You know, I really don't like this is not a joke. This is like a real war. I mean, people are dying. Can you imagine like we're having a discussion about like civil rights and I just come in and it's like, why don't we just like kill all the racists? Like, that's not, it was like, well, I mean, like, why not? Well, number one, we don't even know where they all are. Okay, well, first off, why don't we know where the racists are? Like, it's not we're taking ourselves so far off like the realm of possibility of what's being discussed, what's an actionable solution, to the point where we're talking about the largest atomic strikes in the history of man on the largest scale, and hoping we just like get all the nukes in one go. And if we don't, millions can die, but at least we stopped 500 to 600,000 people dying in Ukraine and replaced it with millions of people dying all across the world, including Ukraine. But there's a reason why for, you know, what has it been now? Like 80, 85 peril-filled years, our chief executive has worked hard to try to stop us from going into the blackness of abyss of atomic international war. And we're just going to roll it when we could also just send the Ukrainians more weapons, increase their leverage, and get them the best deal possible. Why would this be the smarter move?
And
like from the position of preserving human life, it's too risky. From like the environmental impact is too risky. Like, it'd be one thing if he was calling for a bluff, but he's calling for us to go in there and just try to destroy all their atomic weapons. And the largest country on the planet, where they're span 2 separate continents.
For other people in Europe, it also is quite worrisome because their assets are also on the line, much more than, you know, American assets are, especially countries with already precedents of Russian annexation, such as Georgia and Moldova, that Russia also invaded and annexed territories from.
I don't believe that we don't have tabs on these nukes, man.
Whatever it is, whether you have or not, it's not the case that you will use them.
Because that's the whole thing that's keeping them safe. That's the whole thing from keeping the entire world from going, I'm tired of looking at Putin's puffy ass fucking face, talking bullshit every day. He's usurped, bitch. He's out of here, and this is now a United States project, just like the rest of the world. You know what I mean? Like, they're the only thing standing between us and that is how many nukes. A few thousand nukes can't be found somewhere on the globe. You kidding me? Dude, have you ever seen a Steven Seagal movie?
It feels like every time a Steven Seagal movie. By the way, I don't think he's on our side this time, Paul. I don't think he's on our side. But, like, I mean, all we need to do is miss, like, a few. All we need to do is miss, like, a few, and then they hit central New York. Like, it's just, we've never had an operation like this. We've never done an operation like this. We've planned, we've theorized, we might have even practiced, but we have no sample data to test this off of. You would be accepting taking an immense geopolitical risk, economic risk to human life much larger than the current risk to human life in Ukraine, which will also endanger them because they don't have the missile defense systems to stop short range, medium range ballistic missiles from ramming their cities with atomic warheads, because we don't want to accept the smaller regional war. Why? Like, I just don't, it just feels like he wants to get it over with quickly, like rip the Band-Aid off, but this is an atomic weapon. It's not, you're not going to get a scab. You're going to wipe out millions.
This shit is wild.
Yeah.
They will target shit from space.
Well.
Like, all you need to do is have a few errors, and those errors are registered in millions of lives.
I mean,
you wouldn't.
Not 1,000 here or 1,000 in that battle. Millions. Within a very short time period. Leaving very area or time to make mistakes. Where you need to make decisions very rapidly out of fear of, you know, the use it or lose it dilemma. You got to use your nukes before, you know, your nukes are lost. It's just, it makes my skin crawl a little bit. Ugh.
Support some shit like that. Yeah. You wouldn't support completely and utterly taking away everything that Russia's got, right?
It's not about what I would support. I would support.
Okay,
I would support literally anything.
Then let's fucking do that.
Nobody will do it. You elected, not you, but you know, the people in the United States elected Trump.
Well, I'd like to announce that I'm running for president in 2028. PaulsEgo for president.
Well, then I vote for you. Okay, my vote is for you.
Operation Simultaneous Hydra Decapitation is what I'm running on.
Yeah.
Destiny's going to be my campaign manager. And we're going to take all. It's a 50 state.
Didn't you literally open this conversation saying that people like wanted less war? How are you going to do that in this environment where everybody wants less war? That was the whole your whole opening argument had to do with like people don't want war anymore.
War. Yeah. Operation Simultaneous Hydra Decapitation, right? Means that Russia can no longer flex this nuclear arsenal. You know what I mean? It can't, because we've decapitated the Hydra. Right? You see what I'm saying? We take their queen off the chessboard. They're
by the way, what about what about the ground forces? What if they say, okay, let's say somehow, some way this actually works. They still have a ground army. They haven't used a nuke in Ukraine once and they've carried on the war. Couldn't they carry on the war anyway, even without atomic bombs?
Yes.
I mean, like, we would have less reason to be hesitant when it comes to issues of escalation. We could more aggressively pursue escalation dominance, but, like, it's a big country with a lot of resources. Let them in. A lot of guns.
But if you send in your queen, we send in our queen.
And your people agree with the bullying. They say, fuck Ukraine, nobody cares. Why should we risk World War II for them? World War III for them? Why should we risk nuclear aid and fuck them? That's what the entire
simultaneous. What's the risk? Simultaneous Hydra decapitation. What are they going to do? Launch the they decapitated that head as well. You know what I mean? Like, take it all.
They're not going to throw nuclear weapons at you. Jesus, that's the whole point.
All right, so you're saying they're not going to throw nuclear weapons at me?
Of course not.
They don't have nukes right on the border. They don't have nukes right in the Atlantic Ocean that are positioned.
Nobody wants to use nukes.
All right, you go. Okay, wrap this conversation topic up in 1 minute. This is retarded. Okay, we can't just you can't run on we can't just run on denuking Russia. They're gonna go to full on nuclear war with us. You can't just take somebody's nukes. It's just
That's why it's anyway, whatever. That's why it's a covert operation.
You can't do that covertly. It's not that easy to just take somebody's nukes. These are nuclear subs that are untrackable.
You fucking hush, and you get some.
You can't do a hush. There's intelligence people are going to find out. It's going to leak. You can't keep an operation of that magnitude secret. There's no possible way that it's going to
hold the fucking phone for a second. I'm not talking about SEAL Team 6. I'm talking about SEAL Team 1, Destiny. Okay, the guys that SEAL Team 6 was based on. We call them back. Right?
It's an operation of this magnitude would be so huge. There would be so many different moving parts that like Russia would find out. It would just be totally unreasonable. It's not possible. And if you make any mistake at any part, then the whole world is nuclear wintered, and it would just be
Russia doesn't even need to try too hard. You literally will have likely Tulsi Gabbard in your intelligence. Like they will know right away. You have like literally half the fucking administration that will come up to be fucking Russian. Paid fuckers.
You know what?
So, no. I mean,
if we're going to do this, okay, if this is the plan, and we're going to do this, and PaulsEgo wins, there's only one man that can. You know who I'm talking about. You guys know who I'm talking about. By the way, this guy actually is cleared to do atomic detonations. If you look at the button on his bottom right hand pocket, like down here, that is like approval for use of atomic weapons. Okay, so when they say this guy's a killer, they mean it. If you don't know who that is, there's homework. Figure it out. You can Google it yourself. I'm sure somebody in chat will tell you.
Paul, I really appreciate.
If you ever see somebody like that at a gun range, don't fuck with them, okay? Guys that look like that are the deadliest killers.
Your
Is he SEAL Team 1? No, that's SEAL Team 0.
It's very cool, and you know, you should make a movie out of this. But yeah, what I'm saying, I'm gonna go right now. Like, but all I'm saying is like, I want something for my country that isn't a Marvel movie, and so far, the only thing that can happen is when Europe, you know, steps up. I hope instead of the United States, which Nordics seem to be doing and Baltics seem to be doing, thank fuck, and help us with actual like things that on the ground can help us.
When is the so what's the end goal? If not a decapitation and a removal from Russian power and influence, tons of nuclear weapons at which they're keeping the world at gunpoint, what is the end goal?
Our goal is quite less ambitious than yours. Because it's just the preservation of our nation and not to return to being subjugated and used as a bitch by Russia, and where they owned entire industry of my country before 2014. So everything was owned by Russian citizens in this country. And our goal is to preserve our nation and to somehow survive this shit. That's our goal. Pretty small, I'd say. On the big your goal as a big hegemonious country is to not succumb to fucking nuclear threats and not allow countries that have nuclear countries to bully countries that don't have nuclear weapons, especially since we gave those fucking nuclear weapons that we did have because of guarantees given us by United States and Russia of our sovereignty in Budapest Memorandum. So yeah, that's your goal, but you're not doing it.
Well, maybe I'm an advocate for us just doing it, you know.
What I mean is not the Hydra operation, though, just so we're clear.
Okay, not Hydra simultaneous decapitation.
No, that's
I don't think it's your job.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that I'm not on your Hydra mission. I'm just saying that, that's just,
Would you join my Hydra mission if I was putting something like that together?
You know what? At this point, Paul, I'd join anything. I'd sign a contract with Devil himself, okay?
This is what I'm talking about. This is bridges, Destiny. You see what I mean? Ideologically, not on the same page, but a bridge has been built.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much.
Good luck.
You guys haven't even talked about ideology. I don't even know if you guys see eye to eye on anything ideologically. It's just been running through theories and history.
Yeah, bye-bye, everyone.
Have fun, bye.
Yeah, Paul, good luck with your presidency. Yeah, bye-bye.
Yeah, I'll get out of here too, Destiny. It's been fun. Thanks for talking to me today.
Yep, love you. Be careful.
Have a good one, bud.
Bye. Holy Jesus. All right. Good luck.
Operation Double Hydra beheading, huh? Okay. I still think his perspective was generally naive. I think he did good here listening. I don't think he spoke beyond his means when it comes to claiming knowledge he did not have. He was present about what he was uninformed with. But even with that knowledge, I don't know how much it makes the situation better if you then go out on a branch and start proposing like fantasy situations. Instead of working in the tough reality that we find ourselves in. Maybe it's because it's difficult for him to even contemplate making a decision where he feels like he'd be supplying one side in a war because of how much he's crusaded against war, generally speaking, up to this point. And so now he's just trying to find like a quick band-aid solution that gets him everything he wants. But the one that he's found is an extremely risky scenario. Either way, though, Anna did a good job. Destiny did a good job. Probably the best job I've seen for Destiny yet when it comes to showing that perspective, and I appreciated the shout out at least. War bad. Can I just put out there, by the way, while I got the most people, I was told by PaulsEgo and gang that we debate Ukraine again. And we had one debate on Ukraine. We disagreed. They say we'll talk about it again later. It's been almost like 2 years now or something. It's going on 2 years. When do we get to like retouch up?